If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
Has anyone encountered pale humanoid creatures, gray humanoid aliens, or unknown forest beings that seemed out of this world or reality? If so, share your story or encounter.
Florida encounter. Date, January 7, 1997. Time, late night. Ryan Chapman and two other witnesses were staying in a cabin at an undisclosed location when they saw strange flashing lights in the sky. Feeling apprehensive, the witnesses decided to make a perimeter check of the area. Suddenly one of them screamed, and they saw a large disc-shaped craft hovering over the cabin. One of the witnesses loaded a gun and began firing at the craft. When nothing happened, they ran to the cabin. On the way there, their path was blocked by several short, thin, gray-skinned humanoids that appeared to be carrying long, needle-like implements. The creatures seized the witnesses, who tried to flee but faced overwhelming force. Ryan felt pain on the back of his neck as he fell to the ground and blacked out. The next day after coming, they found strange marks on their chins, wrists, and behind their ears. A scorched area was found on the roof and walls of the cabin. About a year ago, I was out back with my family. It was around 8, and the sun was setting. We lived in a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. The closest neighbor was far away. Something down the field kept catching my eye, but I ignored it at first. My sister saw it too and kept looking out towards the trees. She was getting freaked out about it. My mom said to go investigate, so I and my sister started to walk across the field towards the tree line. Big mistake. It's hard for me to describe. This was the most terrifying thing that has ever happened to me. I didn't see it at first, and I didn't understand why my sister was so scared. It wasn't until we were about 100 yards away that I finally saw this creature. Tall, probably 8 or 9 feet tall, white, humanoid with an elongated head. And no face. It had long arms and peeked around the trees. We stopped in our tracks. We couldn't tell what it was. It took a few steps further out of the trees and swayed back and forth at me like a praying mantis. My sister and I ran screaming back to the house, where my mom stood, jaw dropped. She saw it too. I had never been so scared in my life. We grabbed the binoculars and watched this terrifying creature peek in and out of the tree line, spying on us. My grandma thought we all had a wild imagination. The sun was almost gone now, and it was getting really dark, and the darker it got, the more it moved. Back and forth along the trees. It was terrifying, so we went in for the night and locked everything up tight. I couldn't sleep that night. I was hearing scratching on the roof, and at one point, a very loud bang and various noises coming from the barn. I was terrified that I would wake up to my animals missing. The next morning my grandma asked if we heard the loud bang outside that night. She ended up taking my grandpa with her on her morning walk. I have no idea what it was, and it haunts me to this day. A story from my friend helped me figure out what this was. The humanoid in my doorway. When I was about 10 years old, I used to stay up very late at night. One of these nights I was watching some Minecraft videos because it was popular at the time. While watching the video, I felt as if I were being watched, and I experienced that sensation frequently throughout that week. My eyes were fixed on the doorway of my room. One of these nights I saw something I regret seeing. It was a gigantic dark dog-like figure standing there. Its eyes glowed blue, and I could hear it growling and snarling towards me. I was frozen in fear. I have never been so scared in my life. I passed out and awoke to it being gone. I thought it was just a dream until I found my bedroom window wide open and claw marks on the glass. I don't know what I saw, but I hope I never see it again. Okay, finally I get to tell this, but back in 2008 I was shooting a video project for college with other students. We were spending the night there, some in the house and some camping outside. This was in a rural home in Colombia. We were not drinking or anything. The teacher was there with us, and we were filming at night. We took a break, sat around the fire, and I noticed something moving in the woods. It was in my periphery, but the tall, skinny, long-limbed humanoid with white skin stood out behind the dark trees. I kind of gasped. We have a gorilla problem, so my rational brain went right away to that even though it didn't explain the figure, but before I even said anything, a friend said, "You guys saw that, right?" We all went just completely quiet, grabbed our stuff, and got inside the house and just jammed everyone there. Nobody was sleeping outside that night. We asked the people that worked there the next morning, and they just laughed and said, "Yeah, they hang around, just don't follow." So yeah, after all this year I still think about that bright silhouette. Dark reptilians. Location and date, night of 1976 at Bobadilla Air Base in Malaga, Spain. While guarding an ammunition depot near a freight train, a military guard observed a strange figure. about 1.20 meters in height and black in color, that was moving over the train tracks in a very quick and agile manner. Two guards approached the figure and pointed their rifles at it, and it suddenly turned around and stared at the two men with two large bright red glowing eyes. It jumped in the darkness and disappeared. Around the same time, other soldiers at the base reported seeing a similar figure and strange objects in the area. One night, in the same base, a soldier was tasked with guarding a metallic cage, which contained a weird reptilian creature that emitted strange, grunting sounds. One night while standing duty, a dark helicopter landed, and 3 military personnel exited the craft. These proceeded to pick up the cage with the humanoid and left immediately. The guard described the humanoid as resembling a reptilian penguin with strong jaws and claws. It was about 40 centimeters in height. The guard observed that the helicopter lacked any identifiable markings on it. Encounter from 3 years ago, large, pale humanoid. Hello everyone. About 3 years ago, I and my then boyfriend, now fiancé, were driving on some rural, forested roads in between cities. For context, we're in central Texas. It was very late at night, and these roads have minimal lighting. I and my boyfriend were listening to music and having a good time when we rolled up to a stop sign. As I stopped and then started to drive again, I noticed my boyfriend had paused, so I turned to look at him, and I saw him staring at this thing. I know he saw it because I saw it too. I'll describe it the best I can. It was a very tall, 11 to 12 feet, pale, light gray or beige, humanoid, taller than the car was, so I didn't get a good look at its head. It was standing completely still next to the trees, with its arms down at its sides. It had very long arms and very long fingers. It had a sort of speckled pattern, most concentrated on its neck and both arms. It looked like it was trying to blend in with the trees around it. I immediately hit the gas, and both I and my boyfriend started kind of hyperventilating. I was speeding, doing like 80 to get out of there. We didn't say a word until we were far away, and I had just asked really simply, "Speckled?" And he said, "Yeah." We talked about it a little bit, not in any depth, and then promised to never bring it up again. That night we were so scared to fall asleep we stayed on the phone with each other all night. Now, I brought it up tonight with him because I saw a video about monsters. It was scary to get the conversation going, but yeah, even after all this time, all the details line up mutually. Some new things we discussed about the monster tonight. He noticed that it looked like its hands were completely covered in something dark, maybe blood, with the speckled pattern going up from there. Since my boyfriend got a longer, better look at it, he noticed that it had a head, but he can't remember if there was a face or not, no defining features at all that he can recall. It had no hair, no fur, it was just skin. It was mostly torso, with no pelvis shape, just a torso that awkwardly connected to some skinny, disproportionate legs. Its palms were short compared to its fingers. It was thin, but not emaciated. Its hands were in a slightly forward position with all fingers pointing downward with tension in the wrist. We talked about the nature of the thing, and that it didn't feel like a ghost or something. It felt like a straight-up monster, and we felt like prey. It positioned itself near a stop sign, maybe as a means of ambushing cars, but maybe I'm reading into it too much. It's really scary to know someone else sees the same thing that you think is too scary to exist. We drove that road hundreds of times, and nothing like that has ever happened before or since. If you've ever seen anything like this, or know what it could have been, please let us know. It's been eating at both of us for years now. Thanks. When I was a kid we lived in a heavily forested area in deep East Texas. One night I fell asleep, and I left my blinds in my room open by accident. Normally I closed them, my bedroom window backed up to the trees. We had no neighbors for about 5 miles. I woke up in the middle of the night and looked at my window and saw what I can only describe as a pasty white or gray face with large eyes staring at me. It was the most disturbing thing I have ever witnessed, and I can't even describe it correctly. I screamed and ran to my parents' room. They didn't believe me. I think about that face, even 30 years later, whenever I close the blinds at night. In my heart of hearts I know it wasn't a dream. I have experienced a humanoid encounter. We used to have a cabin up in northern Minnesota. I'll actually get specific, as this has been haunting me for a while. We used to have a cabin on McDougal Lake in Minnesota. It was in the middle of McDougal Lake and very unpopulated. We used to hunt between RD 103 and 106 and would usually set up stands along the Stony River. Until my sophomore year of high school, we had never witnessed anything unusual in that area. My brother and I woke up earlier to reach the deer stand before dawn and spent the day at our stand hearing almost nothing. A deer approached us along the logging road, and we paused for a moment longer, as it was a notable 10-point buck. Then, out of nowhere, it went off. My brother muttered some curse words and headed back to our truck parked along 103. As we were walking on the old logging trail, we started to almost feel lightheaded at the exact same time. I remember all my senses going into hyperdrive. For the first time in my life I felt afraid of the woods. We approached a hill, and suddenly we heard the most disgusting scream ever. This thing ran from our left to our right about 15 yards in front of us. It resembled a human but was a different color, and the eyes. That is what I will never forget. Its eyes were massive, and it ran in a bizarre sideways motion but was really fast. I'll never forget hearing it continue to run off into the woods and then stop. We ran to our car and booked it back to the cabin. The next day we came out with my papa, dad, 2 uncles, and 3 cousins and found the tracks. The only way I can possibly describe them is that they looked like an infinity sign with webbed appendages, and the imprint was further in the ground than the back part. My papa, who has been in the woods his whole life, a Native American who did tracking and was also the director of human rights in Minnesota for a while, said we need to leave. He sold the cabin and never told us about it. Things with big eyes terrify me to this day. A witness pushed his luck during an encounter. If you're witnessing something you think is otherworldly, don't hang around longer than you have to, because you don't know what you're dealing with here. Who knows what these things want? Location: near Findlay, Ohio. Date: May 16, 2009. Earlier the witness had been viewing different UFOs in the sky. The majority consisted of red, blue, yellow, and green flashing lights at a very high altitude. They were also hovering in one general area but would zoom back and forth effortlessly as if gravity and inertia had no effect on them. The witness rode his bike so he could change locations and have a good view of what he was looking at. Later he found himself riding by an abandoned airplane runway. About less than a quarter mile away from the street, there was a whitish blue light on the runway. It was hovering back and forth very similarly to the other UFOs he had been looking at. He watched it for a while and then left to go to a different location. After a period of time, he returned to the airplane runway. It was already 0330 am as he returned to the abandoned runway. This runway sits on a road that is no longer in use because it was partially eroded away by a big flood a couple of years ago. It's basically a dead end with nothing around it except a golf course, which is directly in front of the runway's gate and the fence. As he rode up to the gate of the runway, there was a streetlight directly above the gate, and he caught sight of a slight movement under the streetlight that suddenly came to an abrupt halt. He then proceeds closer to the objects that appear to be moving, and as he gets closer, they start to move again. The witness then was shocked to see that the 2 objects were 2 little humanoids that appeared to be less than 4 feet tall. They had some sort of bulky apparel on, and they had large light gray spherical heads, helmets. They then waddled from the street through the gate. They seemed to sway their right shoulder in conjunction with their right foot and vice versa. He didn't see their faces, just the backs of them. He quickly drove his bike away, shocked by what he had just witnessed. A little over an hour later he returned to the location where he saw the little humanoids. He wasn't too afraid of them because of their tiny size. He was checking his back constantly and looking in every direction to make sure nothing walked up on him while he was looking for the UFO. After about 10 minutes of sitting on his bicycle looking at the UFO, he caught movement in his peripheral view coming from the gate. He looked over at the gate to see a tall man walking around the corner of the fence. He was now walking directly at the witness. The man had now been in view for about 2 or 3 seconds when he realized that it wasn't a man at all. It took him a few seconds to get a good enough look at the creature to describe it. It was light gray in color, very tall, maybe 6 feet or more, and very skinny, and it had no clothing on. It was walking very fast directly at the witness, who began to pedal his bike as swiftly as he could away from the creature while he nearly burst into tears from fear. Once he got up to full speed, he looked behind to see if the creature had given up the pursuit, and to his surprise, it had not. It was still coming at him. The witness, however, managed to drive away and return home. The entity shows up in the man's bedroom. Monona, Wisconsin. A Dane County man says a gray-like entity showed up in his bedroom last Thursday. The anonymous Wisconsinite said that he was looking through his bedroom window watching his mother coming out of a vehicle parked outside when he noticed the strange figure right behind him. It was in the reflection of the room, while my back was turned. It apparently sneaked from hiding to the staircase, the man wrote. My father was asleep in a different room. The man added that the creature disappeared after that, leaving no trace. He described the figure as a 4-foot-tall humanoid with pointy ears and large black eyes. Its nose and mouth, he says, were small, and it had a hand with less than 5 long fingers. The alleged creature was reportedly wearing a blue one-piece suit. Last November, a Florida man reported a few creatures in his Lee County home. A month earlier, A woman in Washington said a smiling alien had entered her bedroom and that the alleged creature released a yellow mist, prompting her to fall into a deep sleep. The city of Monona is located in southern Wisconsin and has a population of 8,000. A large bird-like creature with an old man's face. Villa Covadonga, Chile, April 8, 2001, 10 p.m. Freddy Villalobos, his cousin Christopher Juanca Valenzuela, and a group of friends had just finished a soccer match in a nearby field when they saw a strange bird. It was about 70 centimeters in length. It landed on top of a public light pole. The light fixture dimmed as the creature landed on it. It was to a point where it was almost completely out. The witnesses were able to see that it had round reddish-yellow eyes. The creature emitted short squeaking sounds. One of the witnesses turned on the truck headlights in order to obtain a better look, and the bird reacted immediately, covering its head with its wings, as the light apparently bothered it. It seemed to be floating on top of the light fixture rather than having its feet on top of it. Suddenly, it opened up its wings for a brief moment, and they saw its head. They described it as horrible. It resembled the head of an old man with a long nose and a triangular-shaped mouth. Scared, the kids began throwing rocks at it. It shortly flew away and disappeared. I led something home, and now my cat is gone. To provide some context, I am a female, 14, and 5 feet 1 inch. This happened about a month ago. I like to skateboard at night, so it's become almost a ritual to go down my street right before I get ready to go to bed. My street is about a mile long and is surrounded by woods on both sides. So basically in the middle of nowhere. One evening, I was approximately halfway along my street when I began to experience an unusual sensation. You know that stereotypical feeling of being watched? Yeah, I was feeling that. Being creeped out, I decided to end my ride early, peering anxiously into the woods, expecting to see someone there. I decided to look behind me when I saw it, a large humanoid figure standing at the end of my sight line. It was tall and dark. Too dark. Its long arms reached past where a human's knees would be. I have no idea what it was, as it was definitely not human. I hauled out of there and down a hill at lightning speed, but every time I looked back, I could still see it. It was following me. When I got home I ran inside and up to my room. I shut off all the lights and hid in the corner. As wimpy as that sounds, I know most of you would too. I was home alone, and no sane police officer would believe me. Eventually I crashed, and everything was normal for about a week. One day, a week or two ago, our family cat went missing. 3 days later we found him in the pines. I started sobbing because I knew who was responsible for this. After that day I've heard a faint scratching outside my window every night, and I never feel alone. Each day, my night terrors worsen, and all I can think about is that. If I'm not careful, I will be on that tree next. I keep my curtains drawn, and I haven't been skateboarding since. My night terrors have become sleep paralysis. I wake up and am unable to move. I look to my right and see the figure standing there. Each night it gets closer. I fear what will happen when it reaches my bed. The scratching has become more frequent. I am unable to fall asleep peacefully, and I have become afraid of sleep, as it only brings night terrors and sleep paralysis. Mullet Creek Monster. A few nights ago after a late dinner, I went out for a quick walk. It was heavy and muggy out. Not far from my house in Safety Harbor, I headed south on Philippe Parkway on foot. Crossing over the Mullet Creek Bridge on Philippe Parkway and looking off to the side, I saw a steep but easily accessible pathway to the left of the bridge, and my curiosity got the best of me. Living here for years, I've never ventured down by the water. After a bit of a struggle, I made it down, and with a few short steps, I could see under the bridge. Startled, I saw a silhouette in the center of the water directly under the bridge. It seemed backlit, so what I saw was a pure black bust, from the shoulders up with arms to the side of a large pro wrestler-sized figure. Within the first few seconds, thinking it was someone fishing, I said, "Hey," and waved. It started making an insect-like electric soft buzz sound, almost like cicadas and a deep fat fryer cooking fries, and a weird smell, kind of like burning plastic. I squinted, trying to get a better look, and it didn't move or acknowledge me apart from the buzzing. It was definitely not a man. It was huge and alive and covered in what seemed like textured tendrils. Everything I saw was silhouetted in black, but I could see light between the tendrils. I was overcome with fear and tried scurrying up the side of the hill. The sand and dirt kept caving in under me like I was in an antlion's trap. The creature didn't see my struggle, but I finally made it up by clawing and climbing as hard as I could. I raced home and jumped in the shower, trying to replay what happened. I went to bed feeling uncomfortable and odd. I texted 2 friends about it before falling asleep. I woke up the next morning feeling sick, really sick. I am not sure if my sickness was caused by the smell, the buzzing, or both. A handful of times while I was sick, my friends texted me mocking me about after-dinner strolls with the marsh man, but I never replied to them, as I didn't have the energy to entertain them in their disbelief. Humanoid and his son. Location: Maricao, Puerto Rico. Date: 1992. Time: evening. Gerardo Rosario was weeding his property when he suddenly heard a noise to the side. Upon investigating it, he noticed a hairy creature climbing up the hillside. It was about 5 feet tall, hairy, and was accompanied by a smaller hairy creature just like it. He could not make out their faces because they were climbing sideways, but he noticed hair covering their features except around the eyes and cheeks. Another witness, a 12-year-old boy on his way to school, was distracted by some odd sounds coming from the roadside. When he went over to investigate, he discovered 2 creatures sitting on a large boulder in a mountain stream at the bottom of the ravine. The larger creature walked around the top of the boulder, as if keeping watch, while the smaller figure remained seated. The large creature emitted the moan that had drawn his attention in the first place, causing the witness to become frightened and flee the area. Alien story. So I have some terrifying stories you guys might like. Every time I tell the story, the hair on my arms rises. I was approximately 20 years old. For an entire week, I experienced recurring nightmares. One of the most relevant dreams I had involved being in this place. It looked like an underwater-style bunker because I was swimming in what seemed like water. However, I could breathe, and I felt everything, like the water moving between my fingers. There was a man swimming in front of me dressed in a jean jacket with long black hair who obviously didn't see me. I followed him, and he crawled up to something that looked like a sewer opening. When he opened it, I saw 4 long tan arms pull him out. I decided to swim after him because I thought maybe it would help. I got to the opening's lid and opened it. As I crawled out, I was in the building. It had to be as short as 5 feet 11 inches because I had to arch over just a few inches. The walls were white but had holographic panels on them. I walked down a hallway. It felt safe at first, nothing too strange until I turned a corner. Around the corner, there was blood, a trail of it was going into a room. I cringed a little and cracked this door open. Inside I saw these tall, dark-skinned creatures ripping open the chest of the person who I followed and putting strange larvae inside of him. They pulled out a magnet-shaped tool, which healed the skin. I fainted and hit the ground. I woke up around 11 o'clock the next day in a pool of sweat. I was stuck in this paralyzed state and saw a shadow, a humanoid-like creature looking at me. I felt a warm, soft feeling inside my left ribcage, and its hand was inside me, feeling around. Suddenly, I snapped out of my paralyzed state, and the door to my room slammed shut. As I put my feet on the floor, I grabbed my field knife and opened my door when I heard the front door slam. I went into the living room, stood there for a minute, then put my knife back up and stood by the couch bed my stepfather and mom were sleeping on. My stepdad must have felt my presence because he woke up and saw me standing there in terror. I asked him if he had seen anything. He told me nothing out of the ordinary. I don't know what happened, but it terrified me. Come out and play. Klæbu, Mid-Norway, August 14, 1984. The witness in the story recalled an odd incident that occurred when he was 7 years old. It was about 8 p.m., and he and a friend were standing on the front steps of another boy's house, waiting for him to come out and play for a while before everyone went home for the evening. It had been bright outside until now, but now it was starting to get a little dark. While they were waiting, they suddenly saw an extremely bright white light coming towards them from the valley. The 2 boys stood there looking at the shining object. The light now came closer and flew over the neighbor's house on the other side of the road from where they were standing. It seemed as if the object was transparent, and the witness could clearly see the shadows of 2 or 3 people in full figure inside. It seemed as if the dark shapes could look down on the boys as well. He could also perceive that it was only the front of the object that shone very brightly on the outside. On the side, the light seemed to come more from the inside. The witness did not see any more details, and he did not remember any more of the incident. The next day at school during recess, the friend asked him what it was they had actually seen the night before. The witness replied that he didn't know what it was. And this was the last time the 2 boys spoke to each other about the incident. Ghost feet/unknown creature. The events I'm about to describe are very true, and I will take them to my grave. These events happened around 2013 or 2014 in midsummer in a small town in rural New Hampshire. In both stories, one of my friend's friends was present and witnessed the same events that I did. The first event took place on a warm summer night. My friend and I live in the same town and only live about 2 miles from each other. At the time I had my license and he did not, so I would drive to his house to hang out and play video games, or I would pick him up and drive back to my place to hang out. At the bottom of the hill from my house, there is an old textile mill that has been closed for some time, and rumors have circulated about people dying while working there years ago. Sometimes at night, if you look through the window, you can see ghostly figures still dressed in old-fashioned clothing. Across the street from the mill is a dirt parking lot that telephone companies park their work trucks in and grab them in the morning. I had just picked up my friend, and we were driving back to my house. As we were driving by the dirt parking lot, we noticed something. The telephone company trucks were big, and you could see underneath them, and on the other side of one of the trucks, I saw a pair of legs and feet, like someone was just standing there motionless. The legs were very pale and stood out in the darkness, and there were no shoes, just bare feet. It looked like the legs of a child around 8 years old. As we kept driving and passed the truck, the feet and legs disappeared like they were never even there. We were going fast enough that there was no way an actual person could have run off before we passed them. I asked my friend if he just saw that, thinking I was crazy. "Are you referring to the white legs and feet?" he asked. To this day I still hope it was our imagination playing tricks on us, but occasionally I wonder if a child may have died working in the mill many years ago when child labor was legal. This last event happened to me and my same friend as the ghost legs. It was late at night, and I was driving him home after coming home from the movies. Let me remind you that I live in a rural, woodsy town. We were driving on a stretch of road near his house, flanked by woods on both sides, and we were not going very fast since the speed limit for that road is 20 miles per hour. Recalling the next part as I write this sends chills down my spine. As we are driving along, this thing flies over the road just above the tree line. It flew next to a street light, which lit the creature up pretty well. Initially, I thought it was some kind of bird, but as more of its body became visible in the streetlight, I realized it was far too large for any type of bird. The thing we saw had the body roughly the shape and size of a large wolf but with short fur. It had bat-like wings big enough to support its weight and size. The creature had front and back legs, unlike a bird, and it also had a tail. Luckily I didn't see it long enough to get a good description of its head, and I'm glad I didn't because I was already completely paralyzed with fear as it was. Later on, my friend claimed they had red eyes. The whole time this was happening, my friend and I did not say a single word. The rest of the way to his house, we said nothing. When we finally pulled into his driveway and I shut off the car, we both started freaking out. I was hoping I was going crazy, and to this day I would think I was, but someone saw the exact creature I did. We went inside and told his brother about what we saw, but he thought we were crazy. After that, we decided not to tell anyone else for a long time because we doubted anyone would believe us. To this day I don't know what kind of creature we saw that night. Just thinking about going in the woods in that town now scares me. If anyone has any idea what we might have seen or has any strange creature stories around New England, I would love to hear about it. So last summer my band went on a West Coast tour, and we had a show in Roswell. I was extremely excited because I had wanted to visit Roswell since childhood, having repeatedly checked out the same UFO book from the school library. Anyways, we explore the city and play the show, and it was a great experience. We had a long drive to Tucson to pick up a friend from the airport, so we decided to drive overnight, as it would be easiest to make it there on time. I know it seems awfully convenient that something would happen in Roswell, and I had that in mind, because it would seem too easy to make up the story, but something happened about 45 minutes outside of Roswell once we started our overnight drive. I'm riding shotgun as our drummer is driving first shift. We are on these winding back road highways that are awesome and give us an immaculate view of the stars. So, roughly 45 minutes away from Roswell, we are coming up to this bend in the highway, and to the left of the van, we see a light. It appears to be a light on a barn, as we assumed it was from someone's property in the woods, but that assumption quickly changed when the light started moving and keeping pace with the van. This bend was going to the right, so we weren't circling a light in the woods, and there wasn't an access road, so it wasn't coming from a car. This light was just steadily keeping pace with us at about 75 miles per hour and weaving in and out of the tree line. Sometimes it would move behind the trees, and then it would just dart out from the trees, still effortlessly matching our speed. The light was dim and didn't shine much. I don't know how to explain it, but it was this bright ball of light that was roughly the size of an exercise ball. It seemed really bright, but it didn't really light up anything around it. Even when it got about 15 feet from the left side of the van, it was just there. At this point, our drummer and I are yelling, "What the duck is that? Do you see this shit?" And then after about 30 seconds of following us, it stops dead in its tracks, about 10 feet off the ground, on the side of the road. No slowing down. Just as if it hit a wall and immediately was stopped in its tracks. We just kept driving, bewildered, and looking at it in the rearview mirror until the road took it out of view. We still had no logical explanation, despite talking for hours about what it could have been. Maybe there is one, but we couldn't figure it out. Still crazy to think about. A humanoid, dog-like creature in the Appalachians. I thought I'd share my mom's humanoid experience. My mom's home is in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains. She has one neighbor, her mother-in-law. There are no houses elsewhere around hers. Just beautiful mountains. One night her dog was barking, crying, and growling. She just wouldn't stop. My mom was a tad confused, as there weren't any outside noises that she herself could hear, and her dog was pacing to the door and windows. After about an hour she decided to grab her flashlight and go outside to make sure everything was okay and that there weren't any animals messing with her trash bins. She figured her dog was picking up the smell of a raccoon or other nocturnal animal. She scanned her yard and the creek and didn't see anything out of place. No animals, and her trash hadn't been tipped over. As she turned to go back inside, that's when she saw it. I will provide the best description I can based on her explanation, as I have never seen it myself and hope to never encounter it. It was standing on its hind legs. Its back legs looked animal-like, and its front looked more human. It wasn't hairless but looked as if it had mange, with long fur here and there. The top half looked like a humanoid man, while the lower half looked like an animal. She stood paralyzed with fear, shining her light on it. It looked at her, and then it started walking, on all fours, out of her yard and into the mountains. As it did, it stopped and looked back at her and finally disappeared into the darkness. Her second encounter wasn't as intense, but it's worth mentioning either way. It was weeks later when her dog began acting out again. She tries her best now to not go outside once the sun goes down. She turned her lights off inside and looked out of her kitchen window. With the light from her yard, she was able to see it in her backyard again. Although it was further away from her and not as detailed. She said it had the same shape and appearance, and she instantly recognized it as the same thing she had seen just weeks earlier, which sent chills down her spine. She said she closed her eyes and let go of her blinds, so they closed, for what felt like several minutes, and when she opened her eyes and pulled down the blinds to look back out again, it was gone. She said it took everything in her to open those blinds back up and look out. For weeks following, she would shoot her gun off right at the edge of dark. Now anytime her dog acts out, she will scan her yard and then step out on the porch, with the back door still open, just in case, and shoot her gun a couple of times. She hasn't encountered it again. This took place in eastern Kentucky, and it happened in the summer of 2019. I will talk to my mom later tonight and ask her if there are any other details on its appearance that I've missed. It has been some time since I discussed it with her, as it tends to cause her fear after nightfall, leading her to call and keep me on the phone later than usual. I'm a farmer. I was going to my grandparents' place, which was less than 2 kilometers away. I was with my 2 sisters on a 4-wheeler. We were going through our pasture when we noticed something on our rock pile in the middle of the field. We thought it was maybe a baby cow that fell and couldn't get up. My sister said maybe it's our uncle, who always looks after the cows, checking the fields. It was a creature sitting on our rock pile, crouched down like Spider-Man. At first, it didn't see us. Instead, it was looking at our pasture, which I assume was for gophers. Although we never had any missing cows or calves, there were a ton of gophers everywhere, particularly at the pile of rocks I used to call Gopher City when I was a kid. As soon as it saw us, it slowly stood up while keeping its gaze fixed on us. Like in a movie. Then it just ran straight for us. It ran as hard as it could. I swear it was putting in as much effort as an Olympic runner. But its long arms were not touching the ground. It was running like the RoboCop in the older films. Its arms were swaying up and down so fast I could tell he meant serious business. We stopped our 4-wheeler, and I jumped on the driver's seat and just took off back home. He continued to chase us, but I refused to look at him. My sisters were screaming that it was still coming, but for some unknown reason I just said, "Don't look at it." Remind you I was the youngest there, my 2 sisters were older than me. I was about 13 at the time. We drove straight home, and I drove the ATV onto our porch. That's how scared I was. We all ran inside screaming, and my cousin, who was there at the time, immediately started crying just seeing how scared we were. We weren't crying, just scared. We called all our family asking if they had seen anything, and no one had. But my grandma, whose place we were driving to, said she had seen something run in front of her house really fast. That's it. I don't care if anyone believes me, I just want people to be safe in the woods. Something is out there. Something that has no lore, like Bigfoot. Something that wanted me and my sisters for God knows why. But I will never be the same. I had nightmares for so long about its long arms coming into my room. It was a long-armed, skinny gray being. It was super skinny and all gray. I don't remember the fingers, so I don't think they were long. Its head, though, did seem weird. It was robot-like. Its cheekbones resembled those of characters from the game Destiny, curving inwards instead of outwards. Furthermore, this is the stupidest part, but its head had a natural crown shape, like pointy things going up like a crown, which made no sense. That's the thing about what we saw. It made absolutely no sense at all, but I know it was real. It is akin to perceiving a color that has no existence. It defies all logic, yet it persistently resides in your mind. I came face to face with a humanoid. Does anyone know what this could be? It was 2010, around early mid-fall, and I was 11 years old and my sister was 5. My little sister and I spent the day with our grandparents, and when night comes around, it's time to go. My mom is inside talking to my grandma, doing that thing where we say goodbye 5 times before we leave. My little sister and I are outside walking through their backyard headed to our mom's car. It is approximately 9:30 to 10 o'clock in the evening, and we are jogging and playing in the yard en route to the car, which is parked directly beneath my favorite tree. I used to climb it a lot. For some unknown reason, I looked up into the tree, screamed, grabbed my sister, and ran away. Staring right at me was someone who looked like a boy but with glowing blue skin. He looked a little older than me, with blonde hair, and I would have thought he was human, but his skin was literally glowing blue. It was not a shiny or bright glow. It was as if you were standing in front of a blue light and it was reflecting off of you. That kind of blue glow. But his skin wasn't illuminating the tree itself or his clothes, the light wasn't reflecting off anything. His skin was simply glowing brightly. He was sitting in the tree, from which he was looking down at the ground below, but his body wasn't strained. He was positioned in kind of a leaning forward way, supporting himself with the branches. I looked at him, and he looked at me, and it was like a second of staring. He didn't feel threatening. He had a blank but slightly surprised and a little bug-eyed or wide-eyed look. His expression, if I could put it into words, was like, "I'm surprised you see me, but what are you going to do about it?" We ran back into the house. We both saw him. We all came out quickly, but it was gone. Anyone see something like this? Alien? Vampire? Humanoid close encounter. Did she see a bear, a troll, or maybe Bigfoot? Or was it even an alien? The incident occurred in Kinnefjäll, western Sweden, during the late summer of 1968 or 1969. In the spring of 1988, Margareta Nielsen told UFO Info what she had experienced when she was in her 20s in the late 1960s. It was a fascinating and, at the same time, slightly frightening story that she shared. It also bore eerie similarities to what some other young girls had experienced about 3 to 4 years earlier in almost the same wilderness area. The locations were only about 30 kilometers apart, approximately 20 miles. Unfortunately, Margareta Nielsen did not remember the exact time of year of the incident, but she knew that it was in late summer or early autumn when many of the forest berries were ripening. But she still remembered what happened exactly, almost in detail, as if a movie was playing in her head. On this day, Margareta and 3 other female friends were going out into the forest in the vast wilderness of the Kinnefjäll mountain area to pick lingonberries, and other berries and maybe chanterelles if they found any. The group consisted of the witness Margareta, Joanna, Emma, and Lovisa, and all 4 were young and stable women in their early 20s. When they set off in the morning, the fog lay thick over the village of Hedekas, where they lived. Emma thought it was a bit spooky because she had been scared by her boyfriend, Knut Olsen, who told her that the night before, mysterious lights had been seen above the forests where they were going. Whether this was true or not, they did not know, but the other girls did not care what Knut said because he was known in the village as someone who exaggerated a lot and did not always stick to the truth in his stories. But that did not make Emma calmer. When the young women reached the forests on the mountains, the fog began to lift a little, but the veils of mist that remained and wandered over the moss-covered rocks among the pines and firs created a magical atmosphere as if it were an enchanted forest from one of John Bauer's fantasy paintings. Emma was still worried, and the dark, deep forest made her start thinking about ghosts and trolls. The other girls thought she was a bit childish and tried to explain to her that there were no such things as supernatural beings. They now began to approach the heath area where Margareta had found a lot of berries in previous years, and this year too there were lots of red lingonberries everywhere. The women set off and picked the baskets full. As time passed, Margareta became fully focused on picking berries and did not realize that she had wandered far from the rest of the group. She could neither see nor hear them anywhere in the fog that still lingered over the heath. Then she got a strange feeling of being watched and looked up, and she could also feel the presence of something. Suddenly she noticed a movement in the corner of her eye, and she slowly turned around. And that was when she saw it, the creature. What she saw was something bear-like in black fur. The beast's hind legs resembled those of a bear, while its arms were long, furry, and slender with clawed hands. The creature seemed to have no neck. Its head seemed to be attached directly to its shoulder. Its eyes were large, slightly slanted, and shone from within with a greenish-yellow glow. The head had some similarities to a frog, but no more. It had no ears or mouth. Margareta was terrified and shocked by what she saw and could not move. The creature then suddenly grabbed the witness and closed its furry arms around her. Margareta felt something evil and a hostility from the creature, and she tried to scream but could not. She also smelled an odor from it similar to a wet dog. Her heart was beating fast, and the only thing she could think about was to escape. She thought her last moment had come. Desperately, she kicked at the creature's chest, and it felt as if the boot just sank into some doughy substance. She tore herself free from its grip, and the sleeves of her jacket were torn to shreds by the creature's sharp claws, and she could feel them making deep scratches on her skin. The creature disappeared into the mist, and Margareta fell backwards into the heather and lingonberry bushes. She quickly got to her feet and ran away. The basket of berries was left behind. She ran up a slope and towards the gravel road. Then her legs could no longer carry her, and she sank to her knees in the mud and burst into tears, screaming out the pain from her torn, bleeding arms. Soon her friends came and tried to calm her down. "Have you wrestled with a bear?" one of the girls asked. Then came shock number 2. The young women heard a dull rumble coming from above them. The 4 looked up in surprise and saw a large object visible through the fog at low altitude. It had a dark lower body that seemed to be made of metal and was shaped like a giant stingray. On the top, 2 green spheres were also visible. As the object flew over them, they saw a light ramp on the underside of its abdomen with several blue pulsating lights. Then it flew into the fog and disappeared. Margareta was fully convinced that the creature was the craft's pilot. They waited a moment for the worst of the shock to wear off, then she returned to the place where she had encountered the creature to retrieve her basket of lingonberries. Later, Margareta went to a local health clinic to show off the deep lacerations on her arms. The doctor didn't think a bear had caused them, so she told him about her experience. The doctor actually took her story very seriously, and since he was bound by confidentiality, it wouldn't be reported. The young woman's boyfriend also contacted a local newspaper, but they weren't interested in writing about the story. One strange detail that Margareta also discovered was that her new dark blue rubber boots that she had been wearing while berry picking now looked different. The boot she had kicked the creature with was pale and light gray in color, and there were a lot of small, superficial scratches on the surface. Despite this, she used the boots sometimes, and they always reminded her of the horrible creature she had encountered that day in the forest. I know this isn't technically a humanoid, but it scared the hell out of me. Alright, I know this is a creature from mythology and it's religiously related, but this is a true encounter. Yes, I was young, but I remember this because I was horrified for days. It seems weird things love to follow me, as I have other encounters too, but they were with ghosts, not humanoids or cryptids. When I was young, around 5 or 6, which is when all of my strange, almost unexplainable encounters have happened, oddly enough, I was riding my bike down the sidewalk of my apartment building. It was summer, so I had just finished school, and I was pretty happy with life. I was a strange little girl, even for my age, so I didn't have many friends. One of my only friends was my imaginary friend, whom I played with a lot. One of them I saw turned out to not be an imaginary friend at all, or so I think. After riding for a few minutes back and forth on the sidewalk, I see a very large, all-black dog, which resembled a Rottweiler, standing just beyond the apartment building I live in. I love all animals, especially dogs, so I quickly squeal with childish joy and get off my bike, approaching the huge dog. I remember saying something along the lines of, "Hi puppy," and approaching it. This dog was no puppy. It was bigger than I was and was growling under its breath. I walked over to the dog when I got a good look at it. It did resemble a Rottweiler, sure, but its eyes were blood red and glowing, as well as the fact it looked like it was made of shadows and darkness or something. Of course, this made me stop when the dog thing barked so loud it made my ears hurt. Obviously, I noped the duck out of there and ran back, leaving my bike. I had never run so fast, and my legs were a little bit deformed, so I hated running unless I absolutely needed to. Of course, a demon dog thing is the best possible reason to be running, wouldn't you say? I just remembered this a couple weeks ago, and I asked my friend Cadence about this, since she loves really dark and satanic things. She lives several thousand miles away in a different state from Washington, so I called her on Hangouts to share what I had just typed. We discussed and researched for a while, and she said that I must have seen a hellhound. I had heard of hellhounds before, but I never thought I would have actually seen one. A hellhound is essentially a dog from hell, kind of like Cerberus, I think, and if you see one, you're supposed to die, or something bad will happen. About 3 years after I saw the hound and around the same town, my parents got in another huge fight, and they broke up. I still don't know if this is a weird coincidence or something like that, but I have no idea. I decided to share this, and I really don't know if it's good, if it sounds as real as it was, or if I sound like I'm a lying idiot. Can I please have some feedback? I actually am still scared. I think if I see it again, it means I'll die. A few winged humanoid encounters of the same being. On March 21, 2011, a witness reported having an encounter with a very strange creature during the early morning hours of March 18, 2011. The incident occurred on a rural road in Butler County between Chicora and East Brady. The witness, a businessman passing through the area, stated that this was the freakiest thing I ever saw, and it made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. The man told me that he was driving down the road when, from about a 1/4 mile away, he observed something on the right side in a grassy area. His first thought was that it was a deer. The driver stepped on the gas to move closer to get a better view. From about 50 yards away, he observed something that appeared to be hunched down and then stood up. The driver then observed a very tall muscular creature. At this point, the driver had his high beams on and watched as the creature walked in front of a yellow reflective road sign, then crossed the 2-lane road in 3 long steps and continued into a wooded area. What he saw was a humanoid figure that stood at least 8 feet tall that appeared to have smooth, leather-like skin that was of either a darker tan or light brown color. The creature never looked at the witness and was only observed from its side. The head appeared to be flat in the front section and then rounded out. At the top back of the skull, it was like one of those aerodynamic helmets. The top was not quite a point but looked like a ridge on top of the head. The face was flat, and the eyes were not clearly defined, but the man thought that they might have been pointed in the corner. The ear that was observed on the left side was long and flat and came up and back and was pointed backwards like a flap. The arms were muscular and a little longer than that of a human. The hands looked more like a claw, but the number of fingers was unclear. One physical trait that stood out was the extremely muscular legs. The witness stated that it was hard to explain, but the legs did not move like that of a human and looked like they bent backwards. The witness also saw what appeared to be wings on its back, which were tucked into its body, with the wing tips extending toward the side of its head. No unusual sounds or smells were noticed during the observation, which was estimated to have been about 7 to 8 seconds. As the motorist approached the location where the creature entered the woods, it could no longer be seen. The next day the witness decided to drive back to the location of the encounter to look for any evidence. The ground conditions were not suitable for tracks, and nothing was found. The witness did, however, measure the road sign that the creature had walked in front of. The sign was just over 8 feet high, and the head of the creature was estimated to have reached about 4 inches above the sign. Since that initial report concerning this strange encounter, it has been learned that other local residents from that same area also reported seeing a similar unknown creature. Dan Hagman, director of BURU, Butler Organization of Research on the Unexplained, also received several reports from that same time period and general location. The following are some of the BURU summary reports on these incidents. March 26, 2011, Keppel's Corner, 2 witnesses were driving to Butler when they witnessed a dark tan, 8-foot-tall winged entity. The face appeared smashed in. It had a muscular body and a head that went to a point. The arms were long, and it appeared to have claws for fingers. When it crossed the road, it seemed to lope with each stride. The witnesses stopped the car in shock and sat there until another car came and they had to move. The witness is willing to take a lie detector test to prove what he saw. March 2011, East Brady. A witness was riding his motorcycle 2 miles past a custard stand and saw a large animal. It was bent over as if looking for something. As the witness got to within 75 feet of the creature, it stood up. It was at least 8 to 9 feet tall, and the arms hung down below its knees. The skin looked like leather, and it was very dark. Its eyes were swept up in the corners, and it had a pointed head. It was very muscular and looked like it had wings on the side of its head. It also appeared angry. The creature then bolted into the woods. The witness stated that if anything, it was straight from hell, and it needed to go back. March 2011, Rimmersburg. 2 witnesses had just left the ice cream stand headed for Rimmersburg and noticed something crossing the road. They came to within about 35 feet of the creature. They stated that it was at least 9 feet tall and had dark brown skin, long arms, and broad shoulders. It had a pointed head, flat forehead, and pointed ears and what appeared to be wings on its back. The body was extremely muscular, and there were 4 finger-like claws on each hand. The eyes were squinted but swept upwards at the corners. As the creature turned, the whole body would turn. The movement of the arms was not normal. The mouth looked like a slit. The wings looked like see-through mesh and resembled wings on a bat. The claws were black as coal. The witness stated that this thing was straight from hell. There is information coming in that a similar creature has been reportedly seen again in the same general areas of Butler County since about mid-July of 2012. Campers and others are rumored to have seen a strange large winged creature. If you have seen this creature, or anything else unusual, and want to talk about this confidentially, please let me know. I don't know if this was a crawler or some kind of humanoid creature. I live in Wisconsin. This was like 2 or 3 years ago. One summer I decided to go out for a cigarette around like 12 a.m. or 1 a.m. I forgot what time. But I was enjoying my cigarette as I looked to my right. Like 10 or 14 feet away from me, there was this human-like, white, pale, bony creature running past me behind my neighbor's metal fence like it was running away from something. The weird thing about it was it didn't have any eyes I could see, but oddly, it didn't even turn its head while it was running past the fence to look at me. I haven't experienced something like that again since that experience. My friend told me about an encounter she had outside her apartment around 2 years ago. The description she provided does not match anything I am familiar with, so I need help identifying what she was referring to. So, the story she told me goes along the lines of this. She was in a car with a friend in the parking lot outside her apartment, smoking weed and talking. Her apartment is situated kind of near the part of the city where it's got more open land, and since it's near the edge of the city, it's got more forestry and such. Her apartment specifically was placed near an open field about the size of 1, maybe 2, football fields. She's in the passenger seat, and she looks over to her right, and near the fence that separates her apartment complex and the field, there's a humanoid creature she described as being darkish in color. This happened during the night, so I'm not sure if she could make out the actual color. Very tall and thin, standing upright, and having a huge head and very long arms. She also described it as walking unevenly, as if one side were heavier than the other or possibly dragging its feet. She says she pointed it out to her friend in the driver's seat immediately, and they both stared as it walked off, in utter shock and disbelief. I asked the girl in the driver's seat out of curiosity about what she saw from her view, and she backed up everything that my friend told me. She experienced this encounter in a city located in mid-southern Saskatchewan. I have never heard of anything that fits the description she gave. And I'm hoping to find someone who has experienced a sighting of something similar. The thing that throws me off about immediately thinking skinwalker or crawler is that she says it had an abnormally large head. I've never heard of a skinwalker or crawler described that way. A witness describes a humanoid/UFO encounter. Riegelsville, Pennsylvania, June 15, 2012, 2 a.m. This report describes only one encounter. This encounter has left me with a multitude of unanswered questions. However, I have had many sightings and feel as though I may be under surveillance. My experiences started when I was 8 and persist to this day. I need to speak with someone who has experience with these matters. I need to understand. A couple of years ago, I had been out with friends until around 1 a.m. I was driving home the way I always go. I have a heavy foot and was enjoying an exciting drive on empty roads. As I was coming up to a nice S-curve, I noticed what I thought to be a deer moving through the brush to my right, about to cross the road in front of me. I braked hard to avoid a collision. As the deer crossed the road in front of me, I was just clearing the bend and could see the road ahead. I immediately saw the glowing cashmere blue light brightly emanating from the mask/helmet/face of a tall man standing on the left side of the road. He must have stood 7 feet tall or more. The deer ran up to the man and stopped directly in front of him. In the next second my headlights fell directly on the pair. I had slowed down to a speed of about 15 to 20 miles per hour to avoid the collision and had a clear, direct view. This next second lasted an hour in my mind. The creature was similar to a deer in size and overall shape. It had a dark brown/gray covering that I want to call fur but was more likely leathery. It had a head similar to a dog with an elongated snout and short ears. It had the build of a greyhound with long legs supporting a smaller, slender frame. The legs were strange. They may have bent backwards, but I cannot be sure. I recall that it moved strangely as it crossed the road. It had no visible tail. The man was tall, as I said before, with a human build. He was wearing a black suit that had several tools and pockets. Similar to something a Navy SEAL would wear during nighttime ops. He was covered from head to toe. Gloves, boots, and a mask are all connected. There was no flesh exposed, like an astronaut's suit. He had a visor over his eyes that glowed a soft velvety blue brightly. The visor was rectangular with rounded edges and was positioned to be consistent with human anatomy. The light somewhat obscured the shape of the head, but from a straightforward perspective, it still appeared to have a human-like head. He was watching me as closely as I was watching him as I passed slowly 7 feet away. We made eye contact, and the blue glow followed me in my rearview mirror until I made the next bend and he was out of sight. At this point a very unsettling thing occurred. I felt him call to me. It was like a feeling more than words. It wanted me to come back. It was a strong urge to turn around mixed with feelings of peace and tranquility. Suddenly I realized that I had unconsciously brought my car to a stop. This frightened me to my core. It still does. I immediately floored the car and blew the stop sign at the end of the road as I raced to home and safety. Over the years, several small incidents occurred that were dismissed as merely strange. However, a pattern was developing. It wasn't until 4 years later that I was able to confirm my suspicions. My girlfriend and I moved to a secluded location in Upper Bucks County, Pennsylvania. We used to smoke cigarettes on the front porch late at night. One winter night we noticed a very bright flash of white light coming from the backwoods behind the house. It was so bright it could have been lightning, but there were no clouds in the sky. We went to the backyard to investigate, becoming suspicious of a possible intruder taking pictures in our woods. The flashing continued intermittently but with no discernible pattern. I then realized that the light was actually off the ground at least 10 feet. This made us uncomfortable, and we went inside. This became a reoccurring phenomenon at our home until one night we decided to find the source. We took a gun and a giant spotlight and tried to find it. We drove around the back of our property and discovered that it was definitely coming from our woods. We listened and watched in silence but heard nothing and could only see the light in the sky above, not directly towards us. We then drove back to our driveway and began to see it clearly again. I tried to flash it and find it with the spotlight but had no luck. It simply flashed as it pleased, with no reaction from us. Then we heard a familiar sound. It sounded as though a 747 was going overhead. I expected to see a low-flying airliner pass overhead but was instead shocked at what I saw. A triangular craft passed slowly overhead, maybe 100 feet above us. It had 3 red flashing lights at each point and several smaller glowing orange lights in between. It was making the sound of a large jet airplane. However, if it had been a jet, it would have deafened us at the distance it passed. It also moved much too slowly to be any type of jet-propelled craft. It was approximately 30 feet wide and had cubic features. The craft moved over us and paused briefly directly over where we thought the source of the light was coming from. It then vanished without a sound, and there were no more flashes of light that evening. We assumed that it had collected some sort of probe that was spying on us. This incident frightened my girlfriend, and she was no longer willing to investigate the flashing lights that persisted on several occasions. Not long after that, I became aware that I was being startled awake several nights a week at precisely 3:33 a.m. It happened so frequently and was so unsettling that I began to research the condition I might be suffering from. I tried the suggestions provided by other people's experience but came to no solid conclusions. Subsequently, I discovered a page that linked 3:33 a.m. to UFO activity and established a connection. Once I became afraid of the possibility of abduction, I discontinued discussing anything of the sort with my spouse. I do not want her to be afraid. Since then we have moved twice and have not encountered any more lights. However, we also quit smoking and stopped looking. We don't go out late at night. I forced myself to stop looking at the clock when I wake up at night. I also now use sleep-inducing drugs at night, and I can't remember my dreams anymore, which suits me fine. I want to know if anyone else out there has seen this man with the blue light or is being monitored by flashing lights. They are not inconspicuous. I also need to know if my new daughter is safe. Is there any way to be safe? Will a secure bunker keep them out? Is there a possibility that these are non-violent, harmless watchers, or are they all invasive abductors? Please let me know. About 3 years ago, my sister, a cousin, and I were driving home from the movie theater when we experienced a very strange occurrence. I can't explain it, but contemplating it makes me cry and feel the fear I felt when it happened. Basically, I was in the back seat, and my sister was driving. We were on a back road in a very rural county, in the middle of nowhere, Tennessee, and we were about 5 minutes from my house. The stretch of road we were on was completely straight and was surrounded by thick woods. It was pitch black, so you could only see about 100 feet in front of the car. So we were driving, and all of a sudden, about 100 or so feet ahead of us and over a little hill in the road, we saw a large white thing walking across the road in an upright position. In a really weird fashion, it hit us all as absolutely terrifying. With no thought at all, we all started screaming. We drove closer to the large white dog, and we saw that it was no longer standing. In fact, it was a large white dog. And it just settled down. right in the middle of the road. I don't know what dog does that. We were all scared, so my sister swerved off the road. We continued driving, discussing how unsettling and abnormal the situation was, when the most extraordinary event occurred. This experience remains genuinely unsettling to this day. Approximately half a mile down the road, the identical dog reappeared, walking back into the roadway. And no kidding, he sat down in front of our car. You can only imagine how terrifying that was. The thought of it still terrifies me to this day. I have another story of an odd creature I saw back in that county, but I'll save it for another day. Needless to say, I don't live there anymore. Encounter with Shalawa. I am an Indian. Now the state I'm from is a state with desert, and my village was like only a large-scale open land with very little vegetation. I was born in a city, but we used to go to the village frequently. My family was very conscious to not let me forget our roots. So as we used to visit the village frequently, I had many friends there, and we used to play on the vast open land in the evenings before dark, as it is hot in the day and dangerous at night. Danger from not only animals and evil humans but also from some creepy creatures too, and I encountered one. That evening was typical. My cousin, friends, and I were playing together, and naturally, when playing with friends, we tended to shout and make noise. So when it was dark we all went to bed, and I woke up to some clicking sound. It was annoying. I became fascinated by it and woke my cousin up, who was sleeping right next to me, and asked him, "What is it?" He had no idea, so I asked him that we should go out and see what it is. He was older than me, and being a village boy, going out at night following something strange was not a wise idea. So we just went towards the main gate of the house and sat there listening to the sound. Now this clicking was not a sound of something, but someone was making this clicking sound with its tongue. We were trying to listen as the sound felt like it was going slowly away from us. As we were trying hard to listen to it, suddenly there was a scream followed by my voice calling my cousin Jagdish, like I call him while we are playing, from the side of our house. We both freaked out and ran to where elders were sleeping. We all were sleeping together in the open. The adults had already woken up after hearing the scream. My uncles made all of us sit together and pray after telling us that this is a creature known as Shalava. People living in the village have encountered it a few times. Nobody ever saw what it looks like because its true body was not known to anybody. They can either mimic your voice, similar to a skinwalker, or imitate your body, akin to a doppelganger. However, you can still distinguish between the person and the creature because it feels as if it has donned a suit that resembles your naked body. So, my family and I sat down to pray while we listened to a creature screaming my cousin's name in my voice. Another really old encounter. Location: Genoa, Italy. Date: August 22nd, time: unknown. Locals reportedly saw a bizarre creature emerging from the sea right off the coast. It was described as a human-shaped figure covered in scales and with what appeared to be snakes protruding from its hands. Cannon fire was directed towards the creature without any apparent effect. Around the same time off the coast of Nice in France, fishermen saw an object that descended towards the sea. A blood-like substance was seen to drop from the object. Others observed 3 vessels swiftly moving above the city. The 3 vessels then approached the local fortress and descend to the water, causing a great boiling of the sea and emitting ochre-red vapor. To the great stupor of those present, 2 humanoid beings, with large heads and large luminous eyes dressed in red scaly combination outfits, emerged from the vessels. These humanoids appeared to be connected to their vessels by long tubes. The humanoids spent several hours involved in strange work around their vessels. Meanwhile, soldiers in the fortress shot cannon at the intruders without any apparent effect. My terrifying Ouija experience, humanoid creature. This experience has always haunted me, and I continue to dream about it to this day. I am now 38 years old, but this story begins when I was 21. Back in 2003 I was living with 2 roommates in an apartment in Minnesota. They were friends of mine from high school. Our life was usually pretty boring, just 3 guys hanging around playing video games. That kind of thing. One day I came home after working a long shift at the grocery store I was employed by, and my roommates had a Ouija board set up on the living room floor with their respective girlfriends. They excitedly told me they had contacted a spirit. They were asking it all sorts of dumb questions like, what kind of car do I drive? And does my boyfriend love me? Just really mundane stuff. A non-believer, I jokingly remarked that the spirit was probably angry with their questions, and the board said yes. I felt it was my friends messing with me, so I decided to run a little test. I sat down with the group and asked its name. The spirit said its name was Mike. I asked it to prove that it was a real spirit and not my friends just dinking around by telling me something only I would know. The spirit Mike responded by spelling out Sue, who is a sister I had not, and still have not, met and never told my friends about. While this was indeed odd, I still was not convinced. I next asked the spirit who I would marry. The board spelled out Kelly Anderson. I didn't know anyone by that name, so I laughed it off and said I didn't believe Mike was real. One of my roommates then mentioned that he read somewhere that if a spirit counts backwards from 10 to 0, they can escape the board. The planchette began to spell out 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, which freaked out the girls, and they threw the planchette across the room and put away the board. I didn't think anything of it and went to bed. A month later, I was trying to fall asleep one night but couldn't because I felt like something was watching me. I swore I saw a shadow creep along the wall behind my TV that was humanoid shaped, but I just wrote it off as a trick of the mind because I was tired. A bit later, I finally dozed off and woke up to the sensation of someone dragging me off the edge of my bed. When I regained my senses, I was right on the edge of my bed, about to fall onto the floor. Still in denial, I thought maybe I had just slept funny. Fast forward to 2007. I'm still working at the same grocery store, and I meet a woman named Kelly who had recently gotten a job there. I didn't think anything of it because her surname was not Anderson. I got to know this woman, and we started dating a few months later. In 2009, we got engaged. One night I was sitting with her in the living room of our apartment, and I was thinking about the Ouija incident from 6 years earlier. I told her the story of Mike and how the spirit informed me I was going to marry a Kelly Anderson, but I scoffed because her last name was different. She got really quiet and just stared at me. I asked her what was wrong, and she told me that at one time she was thinking of asking her stepfather, who I had not met yet at that time, to adopt her. If she had done this, her last name would have been Anderson. It freaked me out a bit. In 2010 we got married and moved into a small house in Wisconsin. Strange things started happening around our new home immediately. I would hear whispers in the night as I tried to sleep. Kelly never heard anything. Sometimes I would wake up and see the shadows of little creatures moving about outside our bedroom door. Eventually, I started to wake up to a feeling of something sitting on my chest. I would be unable to move, and I would see this horrible being staring down at me as it pinned me. It was wispy and malevolent looking. I would eventually regain my ability to move again and fight it off, and it would disappear. I know this sounds like sleep paralysis, but under the circumstances I don't believe it was something that simple. Not to mention, this continued to happen all the way to 2012, when my son was born. For 2 years I fought off this entity that would come multiple times a week to try and what, possess me? Kill me? I have no idea. I was constantly tired and worn out. Throw a newborn into the equation, and I was exhausted. The attacks continued until my son was 3 months old. Then one night I heard a strange voice saying something in an unfamiliar language on my baby monitor. I ran into my son's room, but no one was there. Not a thing. After that night, the attacks on me continued but became more sparse. Eventually it would potentially happen a couple times a month. Unfortunately in 2014, things did not work out with Kelly, and we got a divorce. She moved back to Minnesota, and I started to see a new woman a few months after our divorce was finalized. The second Kelly moved out, the attack stopped completely. I got remarried in 2016 to my second wife. I have been attack-free for 6 years now, but I still recall Mike and the Ouija board. Was this a spirit that was always attached to my ex? Did it attach to me because of the Ouija board, and now it has attached itself to my son? I ask him if he's ever experienced anything unexplained, but I never get a direct answer. I fear I'll never have the answer. Blue humanoids outside the window. Hankasami, Mid-Finland, February 27, 2023. The witness, who wished to remain anonymous, reported an interesting sighting to Fufura, the Finnish UFO Research Association. This was not the first time he had seen a UFO. Back in March 2015, he had his first experience when he saw a luminous flying object in the sky one evening. But this latest sighting involved both a UFO and humanoids. The man lived rather remotely and alone in a house in the forest in Hankasami municipality. There were very few people living nearby, and it wasn't often anything special happened around the house. Just a few wild animals that occasionally passed over the property. But this winter night it would be different. It was a little after midnight, and the man was watching TV when he saw some yellowish, flashing lights in the sky through the window for several minutes. He went out into the yard to take a closer look at them. Then he saw a dark and silent object hovering in the air near his house at a distance of 10 to 15 meters, 33 to 50 feet, and at a height of 7 meters, 23 feet. The object was saucer-shaped and 3 meters, 10 feet, in diameter and almost black against the night sky and therefore quite difficult to see. The craft began to tilt slightly towards him, and he could then see a small depression in the middle of the underside. The witness now began to get nervous and found the whole thing a bit unpleasant, so he thought it was best to go back into the house. After a short while, the man looked out the window again to see if the black craft was still there. That is when he saw something else that made him totally flabbergasted. Out in the yard, two short humanoids were walking through the snow, and they passed as close as a few meters, 6 to 7 feet, from the window, one after the other. He could see them very clearly in profile. The beings were about 120 centimeters tall, 3.9 feet, and they had large heads in relation to their bodies. But the strangest thing was that they shone with an electric blue light, and they were semi-transparent because the witness could see the forest in the background through them. For some strange reason, the man now felt like waving to them but immediately regretted it and instead got really scared and pulled the curtain so the beings wouldn't see him. He went back and sat down and watched TV again and tried not to think about what had happened outside. He didn't want to believe what he had just seen. In the morning, when it was light outside, the witness went out into the yard to investigate the night's events. Not far from the window, he found rows of strange footprints in the snow. They were 15 centimeters long, 5.9 inches, and had 3 long toes. The man described it as looking like his thumb, index finger, and middle finger had been pressed into the snow. He never took a picture of the footprints, and he regretted it. Large flying creature. On the evening of August 26, 2010, around 8 p.m. near South Greensburg, Pennsylvania, just after getting dark, 4 people were sitting around in the yard having a barbecue and enjoying the beautiful weather when suddenly, their attention was drawn skyward by a sound like a swish or a swoosh or, as one witness stated, like air coming straight down. Almost simultaneously, several observers let out exclamations, with one man exclaiming, "What the hell is that?" They were all startled to see a tremendously large bird that was flying over a tree in the yard, about 30 to 40 feet overhead. The man who was doing the cooking turned and looked up to see the creature fly above him at a distance of about 40 feet away. As the bird passed the tree, it veered slightly to the right and went straight down the road ahead, maintaining its low-level path. When first observed, the massive wings of the creature were in an upward position and were beginning to drop slowly, almost as if they were rolling to the bottom. The swoosh sound could be heard when the wings were moving. The powerful bird had flown about 125 yards down the road, at which time the wings were coming back up. The creature was observed as it continued to move steadily down the road, passing just above the rooftop of a house with its wings flapping slowly and steadily about 3 to 4 times until it reached a group of trees about 1/4 mile away, where it was lost from sight. It took about 20 seconds to go the 1/4 mile distance. The source was able to interview 2 of the witnesses at the scene, and they were able to provide a detailed description of the giant flying creature. As it passed over, it appeared as though it was peering below, with its head and beak positioned downward. It was estimated that if the bird were on the ground, it would stand between 4.5 and 5 feet tall. The entire body was the same dark color, either darkish brown or black. The body width was about 25 to 30 inches wide. One witness said the body was very bulky and husky. The head was oval-shaped, and the beak was short for the size of the animal, about 8 to 10 inches long. The tail was about 2 feet long and came out wide to a point. It was the size of the wingspan of the creature that impressed the witnesses, which they estimated at 10 feet or more in length. When asked why nobody thought to take a picture, they pointed out that while there were cell phones lying there with camera functions, all involved were mesmerized by the encounter. One fellow he talked with said that after the experience he felt as if he was almost in shock. It was later learned that another witness who lived along the road where the big bird flew over also reportedly saw the creature. One witness has been a long-time hunter and is very familiar with birds native to the state and is certain that he saw something quite unusual. The area where these observations have taken place, while surrounded with some wooded locations, is well populated, and nearby Route 119 is a highly traveled roadway. Humanoid entity and odd happenings at my family's farm. My family and I live in somewhat rural Kansas on a farm. We don't have any livestock, and when we did, it was before I was born. We used to have chickens, but they often disappeared or we found their remains. That was a few years back, however. This is important. I've grown up on our land, it being my second home from wherever my parents moved me. We live in an old house, with different sheds and a barn. There is a trail that leads down to a wooded area, we call the timber, that has a bonfire area and a creek. We technically have 2 ponds, but one is dried up. Recently I started living here, and so much has come into perspective. First off, we have over 100 acres of land, and I used to explore them. I went bone hunting. I was once a rebellious youth, but the quantity of bones I used to bring home now alarms me. There is a dried up pond on our property that has an abundance of brush surrounding it, and I always felt weird going in there. On Easter when I was about 13, I went on a walk, and I went to the pond. I remember being nervous. I ended up finding a severed cow leg and a spur. It had 3 crosses engraved in it, and it looked like it had been there for a while despite me never seeing it before. When I brought it to my grandma, she started tearing up because my late uncle's favorite song was 3 wooden crosses. Last year I was going to the pond closest to the front of our property, and I started to hear a dog barking. It didn't sound normal, like something trying to sound like a dog. Our neighbors are pretty far away, so it wouldn't make sense for it to be their dog. I decided to keep going anyways. By the pond there are a bunch of bushes and trees around the pond. Some of the brush started to move and sway like something big was in them. One of the big trees started moving too. I was terrified at that point, so I quickly went back to the house. That's not even mentioning the fact that I dream about my house and its property regularly. There has never been a recurring place in my dreams other than my house. I've had a lot of nightmares about it too. The worst thing about our property is how it is at nighttime. I never go outside at night anymore unless I have people with me. When I have tried to go outside at night alone, I would sit outside near the house. I never did try to explore it at night. I've heard weird noises or felt a feeling of dread before I go inside. We have coyotes close, but I know what they sound like. In August this year my partner and I were staying at my house, and one night we decided to do clown makeup and stargaze. They were in my jester costume, and I was in my clown costume. They asked me to do their makeup in a specific way, and I did. We went to the top of the hill by my house, but we got that bad feeling. We were listening to music, but it didn't help. We both saw something pale running on all 4s by the timber. It was humanoid, but we couldn't make out anything else. We ran back to the house. Later in August this year I had a bonfire and party at the timber with a few friends, and we ended up staying well after dark. My partner and I felt scared suddenly, and we all quickly packed up and went back to the house. My partner saw another pale humanoid figure in the brush. They said it looked different than the other one. Last night I was taking out the trash, and I stopped and looked at the field that faces the timber. The sun was setting, and I noticed another humanoid figure in the field. I thought my eyes were being funny, but when I came back outside to take a picture, it was gone. I have no idea what's going on. Any insight would be appreciated. The rake in my house. I'm a 21-year-old who's suffered from insomnia since the beginning of puberty, so going to bed at 2 to 4 in the morning isn't unusual for me, let alone having trouble staying asleep, even if I work long shifts. I live in a fairly small town that is known for some hauntings, satanic rituals, Bigfoot sightings, and skinwalkers out in the desert. Personally, I have always seen and heard things since I can remember. It began when I was very young, with tapping on my bedroom walls and the sound of children giggling outside in the middle of the night, even though I was the youngest in my family. This sort of thing seemingly runs in my family, as my late father was also able to hear and occasionally see things, though those are different stories themselves, if you'd like to hear them. It's because of those stories that my family and I grew up more spiritual than religious. Out of all the experiences I've had, this specific event is the one that most frightens me. This happened just back in January, one night at about 2 in the morning. I was using the bathroom, playing on my phone as most people normally do, when I heard a few footsteps outside the bathroom door. Besides myself, my mom and my older sister also live with me, so I figured it might have been either one of them waiting for me to get out of the bathroom. I finally get done and go back to my room. On my way, I noticed neither my mother nor my sister was up and awake. I chalked it up to hearing something, nothing unusual, as I've seen a little girl in my house. It's not like she was a threat. Plus, I left the lamp in the living room on just in case I wanted to go back there and turn on the console for a little gaming session. Getting back to my room, I listened to some music, and I finally started getting tired close to 3, so I got up to go back to the bathroom to brush my teeth and take my contacts out for the night. I turned off my music so as to not wake up my mom, whose room is down the hall from mine, but almost as soon as I did, I heard more footsteps and a very audible shh. I thought that was odd. Sure, I've heard voices at night before, but this was weird. I kept telling myself it was just me hearing things again, and if I don't show fear, they won't bother me. My dad always told me to tell them to leave me alone if they were just annoying. I was saying that repeatedly in my mind, but I looked in the living room to be safe. I always made sure it wasn't just someone wandering around the house. I wish I didn't do that. There was a thing I'd never seen before in my life, and it was terrifying. It was somehow crouched behind one of the chairs in the living room. I say somehow, judging from how tall it could have been standing up. Because the lamp near it was still on, I got a good look at it. It had long, gangly arms and almost humanoid hands with very long nails at the end of each finger. It was crouched so that it was maybe 3 feet tall, but had it been standing, I'd guess it would have been anywhere from 7 to 8 feet tall. It was pale white with no obvious hairs growing on its body. The face was humanoid in the shape of its head, but this thing had deep, dark holes in its face that, I guessed, acted as eyes. Its mouth was shut, so I didn't get a good look as to what kind of teeth it may have had. It moved a little to try to crouch more in a poor attempt to hide itself. As it did this, I noticed its movements were very slow, almost like a video game character was lagging. Holding in a scream, I immediately went back into my room and shut the door, hoping it wouldn't come in since I didn't have a lock on my door. I stayed in my room for about an hour and a half after that. All that while, I heard some small squeals, more footsteps, and even tapping on my door. Eventually, it stopped, and I heard my sister walking past my room to the bathroom. I opened my door and saw that the thing wasn't there anymore. My half-asleep sister didn't say anything when she walked past and still didn't say anything as she went back to bed. I guess she assumed I was just hearing things again and couldn't sleep. It's not like I could say anything, I was just astounded or silenced by fear. It was 4:30 a.m. now, and I still couldn't sleep. I quickly walked to the bathroom to fill my contact case with solution and took my case back to my room. Before taking my contacts out, I remembered the living room lamp was still on. Although I was dreading it, I had to turn off the lamp unless I wanted to be yelled at for wasting electricity. I thought it was stupid and childish that I would be more worried about being yelled at for that than living to see another day, but I couldn't believe I actually saw something in my house. I ran to the living room to turn off that damn lamp and ran back to my room just like a scared little kid would. I took out my contacts and hid under my blanket. Needless to say, I slept with the light on. Even some nights afterwards, I would hear some tapping on the walls coming from outside. I had no doubts it was that thing I saw. I got about 2 hours of sleep that night, but fear, doubt, and caffeine kept me awake the next day. It's been 5 months since I wrote this, and I've done some research to see what it could have been. There are only 2 things that came closest to the description: the Wendigo and the rake. I believe it was the rake since we don't live in a largely mountainous region, and it wasn't that bad of a winter, especially since I live in a residential area. The frightening aspect of their lore is that when they stare at you, they select you as their next prey and continue to visit. I told my mom about it, and she almost instantly believed me since she's heard the same things I've told her about in the past, so we blessed the house with sage and sweetgrass. Since that time, I haven't seen or heard the entity, and I hope I never have the privilege of encountering it again. I don't even know what to think of this one, it's truly odd. Rocky heads with jellyfish-like skin. Location/date, Tucson, Arizona, March 2005 to 3 a.m. After an argument with her boyfriend and after he angrily left the house, the witness saw flashing blue lights outside of her house. She then walked into the living room and saw one large creature about 7 to 8 feet tall and 3 smaller creatures about 5 feet tall. All of the creatures had very large heads that she described as rocky. The tall creature was wearing a jump-type suit and had a jellyfish-type textured skin. She said that the creatures were humanoid-like, 2 eyes, 2 ears, bipedal, etc., etc. She wasn't too alarmed at first because she couldn't believe her eyes and thought her 2 older boys, aged 19 and 21, were playing a joke on her. Her boys were not living with her, however, she soon realized that these were not ordinary people, as they seemed to be blending in with the wall paneling and could actually walk through walls. 2 other people were in the house at the time. Her sister-in-law was sleeping on one of the couches in the living room, and her 10-year-old son was sleeping on the other couch in the living room. Neither was awakened by the intrusion. She attempted several times to wake her sister-in-law to no avail. The tall creature shot at her with a device that shot out a liquid substance that solidified upon contact. She was not injured by this. The creatures were there for nearly 2 hours but took no other hostile action. She was understandably terrified by the experience and is undergoing treatment by a psychiatrist due to the resulting trauma. She attempted to report the incident to the University of Arizona, but they wouldn't return her phone calls. She has not told her psychiatrist details about the incident. Her boyfriend is also somewhat traumatized but does not recall any details after he left the house that morning. She said that one of the trees in the front yard had sustained some damage. She noticed this right after the incident. A humanoid creature was shot by a hunter in ND. November 1961, Minot, North Dakota. One harsh November evening in 1961, Paul Miller and 3 buddies were on their way home after a hunting trip close to Minot, North Dakota. Suddenly, something they described as a glowing silo landed on a nearby field. They first believed that it was an airplane that had crash-landed, but they were forced to change their minds when the object suddenly disappeared. But when the 4 decided to drive away, the object reappeared, and 2 humanoids stepped out of the craft. Panic struck Miller, who fired at one of the beings, seemingly injuring it. The second being fled. On the way home, Miller and his team had a blackout and lost track of 3 hours. They then decided not to tell the story to anyone. The next day when Miller arrived at his office, at the Air Force, he was visited by 3 men wearing black suits. The men claimed to be from the government and started asking Miller questions about his encounter. Later, Miller recalled that it seemed they knew everything about him and likely already had his answers. Instead, it seemed that they were more interested in what clothes Miller had worn at the time of the encounter, and the men followed Miller home to take a look at them. The men made such a threatening impression on Miller that he didn't dare to tell his story for many years. A 1956 experience of a French woman who would try the reverse of a scenario that so many have experienced by attempting to abduct a gray alien into her car. Location: Choisy-le-Roi, Île-de-France, France. Date: middle of February 1956. Time: 9:30 p.m. It was 9:30 p.m., one night in mid-February of 1956, and I was driving back alone in my car to a friend from Choisy-le-Roi, along the 186, a B-class road at the time, after visiting my parents at Choisy-le-Roi. I no longer remember the precise date. I was 41 at the time and was running a tannery business. In those days, the number 7 A-class road was very different than it is now. It was being widened, and there is a roundabout there now. I was just about to start crossing the bridge over the number 7. On the left-hand side was an inn, gone now. On the right, I had to pass up a slight incline, and it was at that point that I spotted something bright and shining, white, and phosphorescent. There was a faint hissing noise that seemed to be connected with the object, which was suspended at maybe 20 centimeters or so off the ground in some wasteland. I pulled up so as to get a closer look. And then I noticed a person about 1 meter, 30 or so high, moving about near it. This thought of flying saucers, which were occasionally discussed in the newspapers, suddenly occurred to me. What if I could capture an occupant and take him to the newspapers? That would be quite an achievement for me. Small and thin as the little chap appeared, he would not be very difficult to carry. So, there and then, I opened my boot and got it ready to put my precious captive in it. And enchanted with my idea, I proceeded to try to pull it off. By now, around the machine, there were 8 of them, engrossed in looking at something or other on the ground. The thing had the shape of a flattened pumpkin, with luminous facets that doubtless were windows. I also noticed 2 additional beings inside the machine. The others, outside, seemed to be studying the waste ground there. When they saw that, with no signs of fear, I was approaching them, they were off, as quick as rabbits, into an opening in the base of the craft. The last one of them, the one I was aiming to grab, turned round and fixed his big black eyes on me intensely, as if wanting to say something. But, just as I thought I was about to get him, a beam of light shot out from one of the windows on the upper part of the machine and engulfed me and paralyzed me on the spot. I couldn't move any part of me except my eyes. And it was only then, for the first time, that I really began to be scared. It is difficult to judge time during such conditions, so I don't know how long this lasted. But they had all gone into the machine, and then the brightness of the light beam started to fade, and I was able to back away and escape to my car. I got back to the car and sat there, waiting. I don't know whether it was through fear or because I had been paralyzed again, for once more I couldn't move. I clearly heard a sort of scraping noise that sounded metallic and was therefore no doubt their door closing. I went on waiting for a while, 10 minutes or so, maybe. My car was parked on the grass verge beside the road, and I was desperately anxious to be gone. But I couldn't operate the gears and was totally unable to leave. Then suddenly the hissing noise from the machine became intensely louder, and it slowly started to rise until it was at the height of the tops of the big plane trees fringing the Choisy-le-Roi road. The machine stopped momentarily and then took off at top speed. Initially, the entire craft turned orange and then changed to red as its speed increased. Immediately I was able to start the car, and I didn't even stop to see in which direction the machine had gone. Panic now caught up with me, so I decided to turn back and return to my parents in Choisy. When I arrived there, I was gasping and poured out my whole story to them. My father said, "Above all, don't tell anyone about it. You have your job to think of. They'd all laugh at you, and the police would question you and harass you. Just drop the whole thing." And I've never talked to anybody about it since, apart from 2 or 3 people who are very close to me. Well now, after all that, I found that I was no longer quite the same as I had been. I was now more assured, even more intelligent. Every time that I came to a crossroads when driving my car, I now knew what was going to come from other directions. Occasionally, I would inform my husband, "Watch out. A large truck is approaching." Or a swiftly moving vehicle is coming. That was before any visible objects appeared. And I was right every time. Sometimes, had we not slowed down, we would have had an accident. At the moment when danger looms, I get a little tickling feeling in the tips of my fingers. And I also have premonitory dreams, with exact scenes and places, and subsequently I encounter those precise places. She was then asked if she had been injured by the beam, to which she replied, no. She was also asked if she had dreams or missing time but affirmed she did not. She was asked to provide more detailed information about their appearance. From what she says, it appears that they were clad in grayish-blue, tightly fitting, one-piece combination garments. They had large and quite protuberant black eyes and almost no nose, but their nostril holes were visible, and they had a slit where we have a mouth. And she said, they were slim, as though they had no muscles. I didn't get a good view of their legs, but what I am sure of is that they had 2 arms, longer in proportion than is normal with us, and also that their heads were proportionally bigger than ours. She went on, I repeat, what I have just told you is all real, and I have added nothing to it. I checked and compared all points in her story with the version that she had given to my friend a few years after the occurrence. Everything was agreed upon entirely, except for one minor point regarding Granny Jay-Z, who confirmed that they had not jumped up into the craft. She confirmed they had not jumped, but she said she had the impression that they were moving so fast that she could not see their legs at all. She confirmed her description of the craft. Circular, flattened on top and below. The central part is luminous and white, but not glaring. The other part is metallic gray. My friend saw a creature, can you help me identify it? My good friend claims to have seen a creature in Wall Township, New Jersey. In 2013, around 11:30 p.m., he was picking up a friend from a house party. Across the street from the house was woods. While he was waiting for his friend to come out, he saw something come out of the woods. He says it was mostly humanoid, maybe about 7 feet tall. It was very lean. It had pale skin and was hairless. Its head was small in proportion to its body. It had large, but not gray alien large, totally black eyes. No nose. It had backwards knees. Its arms were very long, like almost touching the ground. He said the creature kind of skulked around and went into a deep crouch when it noticed him looking at it. After a kind of stare down, my friend yelled at the creature, and it ran back into the woods. Any ideas, folks? It's been haunting him for years. A couple sees a large creature on the road. Date, December 25, 2010, location, Tennessee, the specific location is not provided. Time, midnight. Around midnight, the witness and his girlfriend were on their way home after meeting a friend to get a guitar he had bought from him. On their way back, the road was very iced over and covered with snow. They were traveling at 25 miles per hour or less. As they were going around a right-handed curve, something on the right side of the road caught his eye. Then when his headlights hit the being or figure, it got on its knees and placed its very long and skinny arms on the ground. The arms measured at least 3 feet in length and had a circumference of 1 inch. As they passed the being, it remained very still, as if it was trying to conceal itself. The being was about 5 feet 5 inches on its knees, so standing, it would have been over 6 feet 5 inches tall. The being was very dark gray, had no fur or hair, and its eyes were about 3 inches and almost round. One thing he thought was strange was when his headlights hit the being, its eyes didn't glow like a deer or other animal. There were 2 large black bag-like items not far from the being. After they passed the being, he looked at his girlfriend and asked what the hell that was. She quickly said that she didn't want to talk about it. Less than half a mile up the road, he turned around and rushed back to try and figure out what it was. When he returned to where the being had been, it was gone, and the big black bag-like items were gone with it. He took less than 3 minutes to get back to where the being had been. He got out and looked and found no footprints or any other signs that something had been there. The snow on the ground was untouched. At this time he became frightened, thinking that the being might have been just past the tree line looking at him. So he got back into the car and drove home. The creature? Thing? Now, this story starts the day after I moved into my new home. I had just moved from my apartment, which was in a bad neighborhood with many bad things happening there, but that's another story. So I had just moved into my new house, a small 2-bedroom house. The kitchen was right in front of the master bedroom, and the secondary bedroom was right off of the living room. I had my mother and 2 siblings living with me. They took the very large master, while I took the secondary bedroom. Anyways, this encounter took place pretty late in the night, around 11 p.m. Everyone had gone to sleep, so I was pretty excited that I got the house to myself. I decided that I would do the dishes to help my mother out and then play some games on my Xbox for the rest of the night. I walked into the kitchen with my dog and started doing up the dishes. About halfway through them, I started feeling really uneasy. I started thinking that it was just an unexpected anxiety attack which I get pretty often, so I didn't really think much of it. I paused and decided that maybe a glass of water would help. While I was sipping my water, I started to hear my dog growling from the living room. I say my dog, but he is really my mother's dog. He is a very, very good guard dog, as in the will destroy an intruder in a heartbeat type of guard dog. Anyways, so I heard him growling, a very low, quiet growl. I, being the stupid 17-year-old I am, decided I was going to go see what he was doing. I put down my glass and walked into the living room, where both my puppy and my mother's dog were standing by the front door, their noses in the crack of it. I tiptoed my way up to the door and listened carefully. All I heard was a faint scratching noise, so I assumed it was just a raccoon or one of the stray cats that frequented our house because we always leave cat food out for them. I took a peek out of the front window, which is located right beside the door, and didn't see anything, just the dark yard and porch illuminated softly by the glow of the streetlight in front of the house. So I told the dogs to chill out before they woke the family up. After they settled down a bit, I went back to finish up the dishes and think about what games I was going to play. As I was washing a plate, I got that uneasy feeling again, the feeling in the pit of your stomach that just feels like something is very wrong. I tried brushing it off, but it was coming on so strong. All of a sudden I got the feeling as though someone was behind me, staring at me, silently watching me. My uneasy feeling turned into fear, then stress. I was so uneasy that I whispered to myself, something bad is going to happen, I just know it. The floor started rumbling as though someone was running on it, running up behind me as my back was turned away from the entry to the kitchen. It rumbled so hard, the pounding of the footsteps was so loud, I didn't know what to do except put my hands over my ears to block out the sound. It ran up behind me, and it slammed me into the kitchen counter, leaving a large purple bruise on my stomach. As soon as it all started, it stopped. Nothing but silence in the small kitchen once again. While checking my stomach, I waited to see if anything else was going to happen, but nothing did. The room fell quiet once again. I started panicking, feeling so scared about what had just happened. I finally got the courage to turn around, and as I did, I sighed in relief. My big-eyed pupper was sitting in the doorway, staring up at me. I walked over to her and hugged her, then hooked her up to a leash to take her out before I went to bed. At this point it was about 12 p.m., and I was so scared and exhausted from that experience, I just decided it was the sleep my body was desperately craving but hadn't received, causing me to think something happened when it really didn't. Though it doesn't explain the bruise forming on my stomach. I said to my pupper, hard to believe that my mind could conjure up something so scary. She was hooked up, and we walked outside onto the porch. Normally we have 4 baby stray cats that basically live out there, but they were nowhere in sight, so I assumed they took cover at the neighbor's house. I walked the little pupper into the yard a little ways away from the side of the house where the kitchen window was. Now, I wasn't in front of the kitchen window, I was at the front of the yard, but I could see the kitchen window from where I stood. I looked down and talked to my pupper, telling her what a good girl she is and how beautiful she looked, you know, what all puppy mamas do. She looked up at me and wagged her tail in delight, but then her mood suddenly changed as she quickly turned her head toward the kitchen window. When I say snapped, I mean she turned her head so fast that I really thought she was going to break her neck. It startled me, so I naturally took a couple steps backward, trying to calm down from the scare. I glanced over to where she was looking, just a small quick glance, and to my surprise I actually saw something. I wasn't expecting to see anything, so I had to double take at the sight of this thing. We both sat and stared, trying to see what it was. It looked like a tall black silhouette, probably about 7 or maybe 8 feet tall, with a very large chest. I remember the chest so well because it stuck out so far, like scarily far. The figure looked thin in the face but quite large in the rest of the body. It was staring over the large hedge that was in front of our kitchen window. It was staring into the window, like it was waiting silently for someone or something to move inside of the house. I'm guessing my dog's eyes finally adjusted to the darkness because she let out a small woof at the creature. As soon as she did this, the creature turned his head and stared at me with huge green eyes. My heart sank, the way its eyes were reflecting the light made me instantly think that what I was standing in front of was a giant, 7-8 foot tall animal. It was silent, no sound, no nothing. I was so focused on the creature that I had failed to realize that the night insects had gone silent as well. There was no noise, except for the static sound of the energy coming from the city. I froze while my pupper started barking loudly and violently. What could this be? Am I seeing things? Is this real? I scooped my pup up in my arms and ran inside of the house, all the while feeling the same pounding and hearing the loud thudding footsteps as the previous encounter that took place an hour earlier. I ran so fast that I almost tripped over my own feet. I darted indoors, basically tossed my pooch on the couch, and locked the door as fast as I could. Leaning against the door, I listened for whatever it was that chased us in. I also held the door closed, thinking it would actually do something to protect us from that thing. All I could hear was the sound of my heavy breaths from running so fast. My dog's barking must have disturbed my family because my mother came out of her room and saw me holding the door closed. She saw that I was distressed and wrapped her arms around me, telling me everything was okay and asking what happened. I couldn't get out the story. For some reason, my mind told me not to tell her, because I knew that she wouldn't believe me. So I made up a story about how one of the neighbors startled me and assured her that I was okay. To this day she still doesn't know the story, none of my family does, and I still don't know what that creature was. But I do know one thing about it, that it will haunt my mind for a long, long time. My gray encounters. I have been visiting an experienced hypnotherapist over the last several months, as I have been having hard to remember dreams that have been seriously affecting me. I have only been able to get into a light trance, nothing really deep. I also had one conscious memory of a gray extraterrestrial coming to visit me. The first experience occurred when I was about 8 or 9 years old. I was spending the night at my friend's house. As we were still little, we shared a bed and slept head to toe. I remember lying on my right side and opening my eyes to see at least 2 small grays making their way towards me. The small grays moved in a really odd way, it was as if they had a bit of a waddle. It would have been really funny if not for the abject terror that accompanies these things. The second event happened about a year ago, and there I was woken up by a gray ET walking into the room. It was pretending to be my girlfriend. When I say that, I mean that I could physically see it, but it was mentally projecting an image of myself into my head. As it approached me, it was flanked by 2 other grays, and they ended up getting really close to me. One of them directly confronted me with its own gaze, and I found myself captivated by its large, dark eyes. I remember it reaching up with a pallid hand, it almost looked like dead/sickly flesh, and its 3 clawed fingers coming up at the side of my head. Furthermore, a word of caution if you're planning on getting some hypnotherapy, it takes a great deal out of you, and there may be a real good reason you've repressed the memories. My own encounter. So back in July 2006 my family decided to buy a pub, and we would be living above it. At the time my friends were all making jokes about how it was haunted, but I brushed it off as jokes given the theme of old pubs being hotspots for ghost encounters. Everything seemed normal when we first moved in, but then after 2 weeks, things started being a little weird. Windows were found open, and sometimes there was a knife left on the windowsill. After a month of this happening and my parents calling the police about break-ins, it stopped happening, but there was never anyone found for breaking in, nor was there any evidence of visible creatures on CCTV footage. Time skipped to the middle of November 2006, as nothing interesting happened during those couple of months. I'm in bed trying to sleep, but my door is wide open, and for some reason I can't bring myself to get out of bed to close it because my body feels stiff. Then a tall shadowy creature just walks past my door. It was about 8 feet tall and was hunched over, and the one feature I can't get out of my head is that its arms ended with long thin spikes. Anyway, it walked past my door, and in a moment of relief, I sighed, but then it came back and ran at me, and I just remember going faint and passing out. The next morning, I woke up with scratch marks on my chest and ached all over. Well, that's my strange encounter, so thanks for listening, and please do tell if any of you know much about any of this. What we saw. This story took place a few years ago when I was probably 18 or 19. One particular morning I woke up early. My mom had invited me the night prior to get up at about 7 a.m. the following morning to accompany her on a walk in a nearby park we frequently visited. It was rather large, and it had a few areas equipped with playgrounds and restrooms. It had trails that ran through wooded areas that were at least 2 miles long, which was why we usually went. At the beginning and end of these trails you could hear the buzzing of distant traffic, but when you were in the middle, all you could hear was the sound of birds and cicadas. Usually when we came, we brought all of my younger siblings, which meant we couldn't walk as far because they would get bored or tired and we'd have to turn around and go home. However, they hadn't come with us that particular morning, so we could walk much further than usual. We walked fast, enjoying the fresh air and not having to worry about children being able to keep up with us. At some point, my mother turned on her little carry-on speaker, which was Bluetooth connected to her phone, and she started her walking playlist of upbeat tunes to keep us moving at a good pace. I had decided to wear shorts, and I remember my legs started to sting due to the very cold air flowing past them as I walked quickly to keep up with my mother. She asked if I wanted to turn back because I had complained to her about how I should have worn pants and that it was much colder than I had anticipated. But it was rare that we didn't have to drag my siblings with us, which was a chore, so I had no desire to turn around yet. We came upon the part where the walls of trees on either side of us stopped abruptly, showing an endless reach of field on the left and right of the trail. Since we'd come this way many times before, I was familiar with this part of the path, and I had always been curious about the smaller path that led off into the field to the right of us. Before I could ask to walk down it, my mother asked if I wanted to. I was all too happy to go that way instead of our usual, boring route. Now, my mom is a big water drinker, and she always carries this big bulky water thermos with her wherever she goes. She was chugging it as we walked. We were carrying on down the side path within the great stretch of field when she said that she needed to go. I was disappointed because I figured this meant we would need to turn around and go home. She decided instead she was going to walk over into the woods so she could hide behind a tree and do her business really quick. "Let me know if you see anyone coming," she said. I told her I would, but I honestly wasn't too concerned. The field went on as far as the eye could see, and surely no one would happen to come down this way. We were the only ones out there. Most people would likely just walk the main trail. It was also during the week, so most folks were at work or school. I figured it would be too odd to run into another person. She was taking a lot longer than I expected, but I didn't mind. I was happy with my change of scenery. I was taking it all in. That was when I heard it. The sound of a vehicle. We were in the middle of a field, with woods on either side of us, so I couldn't for the life of me figure out where that sound would be coming from. I looked down the field, cupping my hand over my eyes to shield them from the sun, and sure enough I could see something coming our way. It was a little Jeep of some kind, and it had 2 people riding in it from what I could tell. It reminded me of one of those safari vehicles. "There are people coming," I said into the trees. Moments later my mom came out, buttoning her pants, looking just as confused as I was. I stepped to the side, getting out of the Jeep's path. The man and woman inside it smiled and waved casually at us as they passed, not stopping. My mom and I started to walk again. After a minute or two, my mom decided we should turn around because maybe we weren't supposed to be out there. We began to walk back, and she suggested we walk in the woods on our way back to the parking lot. This would not only get us out of the field where we were clearly visible, vulnerable, and probably not supposed to be, but we never walked into the woods because she didn't want my siblings going in there. I agreed, excited to take a seemingly more adventurous route. The trees created shade from the sun and brought on a much calmer atmosphere around us. My mother, realizing the serenity of the woods, stopped walking momentarily to silence her speaker that she had been playing up until that point. We didn't know in that moment how lucky we were that she had done that. We were walking in silence not 10 minutes when I heard something. Not birds or squirrels. And not a vehicle this time. I was hearing voices. The voices were talking low, too low for me to decipher how many people there were or if they were male or female. "Do you hear that?" I asked my mother. Turning to her, I saw concern on her face. We were in the middle of the woods, far away from the roads and far away from the path. Who would be here besides us? Of course I thought back to those people in the field, but they had been riding out towards the main path, not into the woods. I didn't have to wonder long. A few more strides in the direction of the voices, and I saw a small clearing within the woods. In that clearing I saw at least 5 people. They had black garbage bags, and they had one of those safari jeeps like I had seen earlier. The vehicle had been deliberately covered in brush. I don't exactly remember because it all happened much faster than I'm explaining it, but I could have sworn the same couple from out in the field was there too. They were all just standing about, talking, with these black garbage bags filled with something. And they were unaware of our presence. At this moment, I was more curious than anything. "What are they doing?" I looked towards my mother, not taking my eyes off of the group. "Is that the same vehicle from?" was all that I had time to say before a hand clamped over my mouth and I was being pulled backwards. I was taken aback, but I heard a harsh shushing in my ear. "Don't make a single noise." It was my mother. She pulled me far enough away from the strange scene and then let me go. "Just follow me. Try to be quiet." We started speed walking back to the main path. "What was that?" I asked when we had walked far enough away. "I don't know, and I wasn't going to stick around to find out. Maybe they're supposed to be there, but something felt really off." We weren't close enough to the road yet to hear any cars, and all I wanted to do was be out of there at this point. At the same time, this was definitely an adventure now, and I was really curious about what we had just stumbled upon. I kept asking my mom what she thought might have been going on. She really didn't have any idea, and she eventually told me I should just be quiet until we reached the main trail in case someone heard us. I figured that would be the end of it. We just needed to get back to our vehicle and go home now. We were walking as fast as we could, trying not to crunch the leaves and twigs below our feet too much. That was when we stumbled across something else. A giant metal cage. This too was covered in brush. "It's big enough to hold a bear," I half whispered. My mom shook her head slowly. We had come to a full stop to look at it. "There aren't any bears here," she said. There was silence. "Maybe some deer." She trailed off. But I could hear that she had not even convinced herself. There was nothing in the cage, and it was wide open, like a gaping mouth, waiting for whatever it was out there to be put inside and locked in. My stomach sank at the idea that there might be a very large creature out here somewhere. We started sprinting back at this point, and we reached the parking lot in no time. On our 10-minute drive home, my mother told me not to tell anyone what we'd seen out there. I suppose she didn't want me to scare my siblings. I asked her once more what she thought of everything we had seen that morning. Her guess was as good as mine. We never spoke of it again, and I think I only told one of my siblings, and they thought I was making it all up. To this day, I don't have any better ideas of what was going on out there. We have gone back to that park to walk since then, but we definitely don't dare to stray off the main trails. A female met a large male humanoid. Location: West Sussex, England. Date: February 5, 1999. Time: 3 a.m. The 23-year-old witness saw a small glowing sphere enter her bedroom through a closed window. Suddenly she found herself inside a brightly lit round room with long windows. Inside she met a 6-foot-tall, pale-skinned, human-like, well-built male with very blue eyes. There were also smaller humanoids described as dark-skinned and wearing large hoods. Soon she found herself back home and noticed a large, straight bruise on the right side of her neck that disappeared after 2 hours. A surprise from an alien. Yesterday, I wasn't able to sleep peacefully as I had hoped. I used anything to distract myself and even ended up watching some comedy on Netflix. I suddenly grew tired around 9 p.m. and decided it was time to sleep. School will be starting on Monday again, and it was a great idea to sleep early since I have to wake up very early. Ever since I was little, I have always had my back face the wall and stayed as close as possible to the wall. My door is always closed since I do not like to have it open, and it feels like someone is watching me. I woke up after a while. My room had become so cold that I was starting to shiver. What seemed way too strange was that I was able to see my own breath. Around February, it gets very cold in my country, but never has my house been that cold. I tried to sit up to grab a blanket, but then my eyes moved to the door. It was open. My parents never check up on me, as they do know that I don't like it. Immediately, I was scared and tried my best to stay as calm as possible. The only thing that came to my mind was that it had to be one of my little brothers, who decided to grab some money from me. The thought made me want to roll my eyes, but it had calmed me down. As I finally sat up and walked over to my door to close it, the sudden fear of someone watching me quickly washed over me. I immediately ran for the door and closed it, turning on the small lamp I have on my desk. My eyesight isn't that great, and I thought that I scared myself because I couldn't see a thing. The little lamp made it easier for me to recognize figures and objects around my room. The feeling of a large hand pressing on my back made me freeze. I could feel the icy touch of a hand at first. I thought someone had broken into my house. But, if it was a burglar, they would try to knock me out or hide till I returned back to bed. Turning around, I expected to see nothing and hoped that there was nothing. Right in front of me stood a very tall gray humanoid figure with a transparent-like coat on. I didn't dare to look up at its face. Its body was very thin, way too thin for a human. What made me panic even more was the shape of the hand. There were 4 long fingers. It did try to reach out for me again, but that was when I decided to look up at the creature once before. It had such a long, thin neck, and the chest showed me some weird bones. It wasn't bones, but some type of tight skin wrapped around it. I'm not even sure if they were bones. The mouth was very thin. Almost like someone drew a small line on it. The face sends shivers down my spine. What seemed to be a chin seemed to be very pointy and thin. Its black insect-like eyes made me back up to the door, not being able to remove myself from it or even take a run. I was so scared, as I had no idea what was going on. But I did know what it was. They have appeared literally almost everywhere in this time. Let it be from TV, music videos, or even games. This was a well-known alien. My body was screaming for me to run. I did the best thing I could do around that time. Ignoring the scary tall alien, I kicked my books off the table. The alien seemed to be confused or even shocked, probably thinking why I did that. But I knew just who to alarm before things would go bad. I heard the familiar footsteps of my father, laughing softly as I stared at the alien's black eyes. It didn't move at all, but it seemed like the thing was floating and slow. It suddenly glowed and disappeared before my father was able to open the door and look at what was happening. I didn't explain what happened to him and told him that I bumped against the desk. He did ask me why I was sleeping so early. Apparently, it had only been 9:27 p.m. Whatever that thing wanted from me. It wasn't something good. Tonight, I refuse to sleep alone in my room. I don't feel safe at all. My sister and I saw the same humanoid creature months apart. First sighting, July 2019, I was on the phone with my boyfriend in rural Oz. I was sitting in my truck at the time, parked facing my house to the east. With him and me, we would be on the phone until one of the others slept. This night it was him, and it was around 10 p.m. After I tried multiple times to wake my boyfriend up or to see if he was asleep, I hung up. After the call ended, I felt like I was going to see something scary, and I tried shaking it off. I looked behind me to the west, and towards the northwest is a lot with a giant streetlight in the middle of the property. In the area between the lot and my house is a ditch with some more space filled with that in the middle. But from the darkness, I saw this being come from the ditch, and in contrast with the bright background of the lot, it floated and glided above the ground, it seemed. The movements it made were very smooth and lacked any jagged motor motions typical of normal creatures. I was astonished to see it because its arms were not like normal arms, they were fluid and resembled tentacles. But it looked like water, and the tentacle arms moved like a wave. The movement of the creature was very fast, which made me extremely scared, as I had never experienced anything like it before. I called it the Fluid Man to my family. I still see it when I think about it. Second sighting, my sister, October 2019, my sister, around 10 p.m. on a Friday night, went outside to get some air since the wood stove can get a little hot when it's filled with wood and coal. She went outside and then opened the door fast to tell me to come, and I sat on the table across the living room and in the kitchen. When I ran over, she said the thing was gone and that she saw something rise up from the ground like a zombie above the ground 20 to 30 feet in the air. She made the movement of it rising from the ground in an upward motion very exaggerated, which made it seem creepier. It was in the same area as last time since if you go out my front door, it's looking west. She said it started flying after two people walking west on the road going the same direction. My sister is an exceptionally determined and resolute individual who exhibits remarkable bravery and fearlessness. She is highly courageous and willing to undertake any action necessary to ensure our safety. She never shows any emotion and keeps a strong front like my dad. We share a unique bond, allowing me to witness her true nature more than anyone else, and she remains my closest friend. However, I have never observed her so frightened and distressed in my lifetime. It also unsettled me, as such a reaction is exceedingly rare for her. Both experiences were frightening, and it was strange that they occurred within just a few months of each other. I always hoped that I would never see it again. My sister always mentions it now and then on late nights. My friend's bizarre encounter with a humanoid. This encounter happened to my childhood friend late last year, and the reason why I've decided to come forward to share her experience here is because when I was listening through the reports in this channel, I came across one entitled Clawed Entity that mimics voices. And it blew my mind because of how eerily similar it was to my friend's encounter, right down to the description of the being itself. Just 2 nights ago, I had a chat with her and asked for her permission to share her story, to which she told me I could as long as she and her boyfriend remain unnamed. I will refer to my friend as O and her boyfriend as K. Here are a few things to take note of. 1. As mentioned above, O is my childhood friend, and we've known each other since primary school. She's usually quiet and shy, though not as much now, but still is to a small extent. An art student, she's creative and imaginative, but not the type to make up stories just for the hell of it. 2. Again, as mentioned above, O has a boyfriend named K. They lived in the same apartment as their roommates. At the time of the incident, they were both studying at the same college, and they've only just started dating each other. They graduated roughly 3 months ago. 3. The apartment complex is directly behind the college, with a river between both buildings. So, it should be self-explanatory that the complex serves as a dormitory for students. It's also large, as the complex has a garden square, several stores, and even an indoor swimming pool. So, without further ado, let's begin. It was a Thursday night, roughly between 9 and 10 p.m. O was alone in her apartment while K was away that night, as he had rugby practices. His team will be competing against a rival college in a few weeks. O was pretty busy herself, as she needed to complete an abstract art project she needed to do for her graphic design course, under intense pressure as the deadline was the following day. That and her lecturer always having ridiculously high expectations of his students' performances didn't make things any better for her. To top it all off, she had a mild headache. Frustrated and getting hungry, she decided to stop working for a while to have a quick dinner, hoping that the dull throbbing in her head would go away once she filled her empty stomach. Heating up the leftover pizza she kept in the fridge from the previous day, she continued working as soon as she was done. Then the doorbell rang, and she heard Kay saying, "I'm home." Happy that her boyfriend had finally returned, she went over to the door, and as she opened it, she saw something that gave her the shock of her life. According to her, it was a figure she could best describe as a silhouette filled with static. However, it was the recognizable shape of her boyfriend, having the exact same height and build. He's 6 feet tall and a muscular jock type, pretty much. It was there for, like, a split second, and there was a short static buzz before the figure disappeared. Standing in its place was something she'll never forget for the rest of her life, a weird-looking entity 7 to 8 feet tall, with an extremely skinny frame. It had a large head shaped like an inverted egg with large, pointed cat-like ears. Its eyes were almond-shaped, each roughly the size of a fist, pitch black in color with a pure white slit in the middle. It had a really thin nose with tiny nostrils and a wide, lipless, fish-like mouth filled with white, tiny, needle-like teeth. Its neck and arms were pencil-thin, while its torso was slender yet sinewy, and so were its legs, which were bent backwards not unlike a raptor. It had large hands and feet, with 3 fingers and toes, all of which were long and thin, tipped with black claws. Its arms were so long they went past its knees and reached its ankles. The creature was covered entirely with diamond-shaped scales/bumps, which were tan-colored and roughly the size of 5-cent coins. Finally, it was wearing a silver, metallic chest strap shaped like an X with an oval buckle, complete with a green gem button in the middle. They must have been staring at each other for like a full minute, and she was getting increasingly frightened of this creature towering over her. She's 5'3", for comparison's sake. Gasping with fear, she covered her mouth and slowly backed away from the entity. She screamed. This definitely caught it by surprise, as both its eyes and mouth widened. It immediately turned and dropped down on all fours like a frog. With a single leap, it jumped over the railing and disappeared from her sight. She must have blacked out, as the next thing she remembered was regaining consciousness and finding herself on a mattress, head rested on Kay's lap, who had placed a wet towel on her forehead. Her neighbor, also a fellow student, was there too. He told O that he heard screaming from her apartment and immediately rushed to investigate. He found the door ajar, and when he peered in, he saw O out cold on the floor. Kay returned shortly after, and while it was initially difficult, they managed to get her to rest on the mattress. Being the caring partner he is, he asked her what just happened. The neighbor had already left. Kay thanked him again as he left, and she told him everything. He was naturally skeptical, but he could tell from her voice that she was genuinely spooked. Also, her headache had gotten worse at that point, and she was burning with fever. He told her that it's probably just a hallucination due to the stress she was going through, but she was convinced that she really did see something and believes that the entity was physically there. She was fully conscious. Despite being stressed out and having a mild headache, it couldn't have possibly caused such a vivid hallucination. He simply touched her cheek and told her not to think too much into it and that she should go to sleep. She's not more shaken up by the incident now than she was before, but to this day, she strongly believes that night's event to be her very own close encounter of the third kind. So, that's her story. Any theories and opinions are more than welcome. A friend's encounter with the Greys. This happened in Puerto Rico. Back in 2009 I was just starting college. My cousin and my best friend of many years shared the same university, so we commuted the same route every day to go to college. At the time we both lived in Naranjito. Our college was in Bayamon, just a couple of miles away, so we would travel by car instead of staying near campus. With time, my aunt noticed that one of her daughter's friends also went to the same college, and to save fuel money and time, she mentioned that we should all travel together. We did, and we made a real friendship very fast as we shared the struggle and the new things college offered at that time. One day, as we were traveling back, we overheard a topic about UFOs and aliens on the radio, and I will refer to my friend as Teresa to protect her real name. We always shared a common interest, at least my cousin and I, in UFO-related mysteries and world mysteries in general. We didn't think my friend liked the theme, so we changed the radio FM to a reggaeton-based FM. She went from smiling on the way back to serious and almost had a frightening look on her face. Preoccupied, I remember asking her about how she was and what had happened. But she remained quiet. We got home that afternoon and forgot about that. My cousin and I went on with studying and playing basketball, a normal week. It wasn't until we came back from a long 3-day weekend that our friend Teresa opened up. On a Monday after a 3-day weekend, our friend Teresa asked us what we thought about UFOs. We told her the usual, that we were interested, but we had never seen any UFO ever. She confessed to us that when she was little, 7 to 8 years old, she was visited in her house. A silver spaceship, as she would describe it, descended on her house very early, like 2 or 3 a.m. Gray-like beings came out of the spaceship and went near her. She told us her family was asleep, and the lights didn't wake them up as they did her, which made her scared. She told us these encounters went on for a couple of months until they stopped coming to her house. Now that I'm older, I think about what she told us. If it was true or false. The possibilities are that a family member or stranger was visiting and she remembers that memory in a different way to mask it, or she was telling the truth and we are not alone in the universe. Either possibility scares me. Very large and friendly humanoid from my childhood. I just found this group, and I am so glad I did. I have an encounter from my childhood that has stuck with me forever. It was such a strange experience, and I don't really know what it was or what happened to it, but I am 100% certain that I saw what I saw. I grew up in suburban Missouri, right around the St. Louis area. There was one summer night when I was 11 or 12 when I was out riding my bike with a friend in my neighborhood. We rode until 9 p.m., and at this point it was just a little past dusk, so we headed back to my house. It wasn't pitch black since the sun had just set, so we could still see pretty well. My friend rode on ahead of me because she wanted to call some other girl to have her come over, and I stayed back to pet a dog. The dog left, and I started riding my bike again, and I looked across the street and saw a chunky black humanoid figure that was maybe 10-ish feet tall. All black, and it was standing next to a ranch-style house, touching the branches on the tree next to it. I fell off my bike as soon as I saw it but never felt scared or anything. I watched it for a couple minutes, could have only been like 30 seconds, you know how dumb kid brains work with time, as I was just looking at this tree. It was silent, I never heard any sound emanate from its mouth, and even when it took a step, I could perceive nothing. It just decided to walk back into the small wooded area behind the house, and I never saw it again. It was an amazing experience, and I have such a positive emotion associated with it, I just have no clue what I saw that night. I still have dreams about it, and I hope to see it again one day, but I'm just not sure I ever will. My house in flames, a skinwalker story. I glanced out of the window, trying to make out the woodland outside through the rain pouring down the panes. This has become habitual for me now. Around every 15 minutes I subconsciously check the tree line. It has been 2 years now since my first encounter, and my life has changed dramatically. I keep a loaded gun with me at all times, although I am not sure how much it will help me. I cannot enter a deep state of sleep anymore, a part of my brain stays awake at all times listening for danger. The creature has been following me since we first met deep in the woods, a memory that still haunts my dreams. Sometimes waking up in terror, sweating, I could swear I can smell its putrid odor. I have been told that the creature is a skinwalker, a creature of Native American lore often thought of as a witch. They are known to disguise themselves as an animal in order to get close to the people that they wish to harm. In my case, the abomination manifested itself as a deer, although its disguise was poor. A rotten deer carcass walking on its hind legs, its neck broken and hanging to one side. In the 2 years since then, I have had 4 encounters with this creature, but this story is about this night. Each encounter has been when I am alone. The sight and smell of the creature have filled me with terror like I have never felt before. I live alone in a cottage near a woodland, the trees border my property, and there is a small wire fence separating me from the woods. I glanced at the clock, it was 2:34 a.m. It is around this time I feel the most alone and vulnerable. About this time it usually shows up. I opened the window to see if I could see through the rain, the sound of the downpour filled my living room. Outside it seemed quiet, the noise of the rain hitting the trees the only sound. It was then I saw the shadow. It stood still in the tree line, the only object not swaying in the wind. My stomach dropped, my heart beating faster. The familiar terror was creeping back inside me. I slowly and quietly closed the window and locked it. I then circled my house, checking that all of the doors and windows were locked up tight. I loaded my pistol and took off the safety. I have read that guns cannot hurt a skinwalker, and I have never been able to get a shot off at it before, but it made me feel somewhat safer anyway. I turned off the lights and looked back through the window. The shadow was gone. I looked around frantically for any signs of movement within the trees. It was then that a loud, slow, rhythmic banging on the back door started. The knocks were heavy, rattling the door on its hinges. I let out a small yelp, unable to keep it in. I ducked down below the windows and crawled on all fours to the back door. The banging seemed louder, each knock jarring my mind a little further. I took aim at the door and pulled back the hammer. A pain spread through my chest, and I realized that I had been holding my breath. I took in a large breath and choked on the putrid smell of rotten deer flesh. It's an all too familiar smell now. I gagged, and as I did so, the banging stopped. The cottage seemed deathly quiet. The rain had stopped abruptly, further emphasizing the silence. There was a loud noise outside the kitchen window. I turned to look and carefully stood up and peeked out of the window. A couple of smashed roof tiles lay on the ground. It was on the roof. The fear was too much. I expected it to get easier each time, but in actuality, with each encounter, the terror got worse and worse. I started sobbing quietly. I thought about this thing following me for the rest of my life. The thought was unbearable. I heard a windowpane break upstairs. It was inside. I heard its heavy footsteps through the ceiling. It was searching through the rooms upstairs. It wouldn't be long now before it found me curled up on the kitchen floor sobbing to myself. I looked at the loaded gun. The stairs creaked. It was heading downstairs. The handle of the door leading from the stairs turned. I raised my pistol. The door flew open, and there it stood, its smell enveloping me. It was wearing the same deer. The same animal has been in the same state of decay for 2 years. Walking on its hind legs, its front legs hanging at its side, its head hanging to its left side. The sockets where its eyes were glowed red. The first time I believed it to be a reflection from my campfire, but every time its eyes had the same dull red glow. I meant to fire 5 of my 6 shots at the creature, saving the last for myself, but in fright I squeezed the trigger once too many. 4 of the shots hit their target, the others were wide, hitting the wall and the door. The sound of the shots was deafening in the small room. The faint smell of cordite was overshadowed by the stronger odor of the creature. It didn't even flinch. The bullets hit their mark. I could see the flesh wounds and heard the dull sound of the bullets impacting flesh. It looked at me for a moment and let out its familiar scream. The scream was high-pitched and undulating at the same time. My blood felt like ice. I made a desperate sprint for the garage door. I flung it open and stepped into the dark garage, slamming the door behind me. I leaned with my back against the door as the creature struck it. The force was so great I fell to the floor. I leapt back up and turned the key in the lock. It began hammering the door with such force I was sure that the door would break from its hinges. I looked around, my eyes darting from object to object. I saw a gas can and a blowtorch. I decided to burn it, trying to end this once and for all. I pressed the button on my remote to open the garage door, flung open the car door, inserted the key into the ignition, and turned it. The car sprang to life. I reached for the gas can and fumbled with the screw top. My arms are shaking, and my fingers are not obeying my commands. I poured a pool of gasoline by the door. I picked up the blowtorch and clicked the button. The blue flame seemed so bright in the darkness, I tossed it into the pool of petrol, and it ignited just as the door was forced from its hinges. I leapt into the car, and without even shutting the door, I put it in drive and slammed my foot to the floor. In my mirror I saw the creature standing in the doorway. The remaining fur on its rotten body was alight. It seemed not to be concerned about the flames leaping up its body. I hoped with all my heart that it would burn to death in my house. As I drove down the road, I kept glancing in the mirror, watching as my house and all of my belongings went up in flames. I lost sight of the creature, yet my entire being fervently prayed for its death, ensuring I would no longer have to endure this life. Later that morning I stood on the steps of my house, the flames extinguished. I explained what had happened to the fire service, but they looked at me with disbelief. As a courtesy, they checked for animal prints around the house but found no signs that the creature had been there at all. The insurance company declined to compensate, concluding that I initiated the fire. I am now staying in a hotel far into the city and away from woodlands. I still do not know if it perished in that fire, although no body was found. I still cannot rest, I still check the windows. I am uncertain how much longer I can endure this way, or how much longer I can continue to live in fear. No one will believe my story, and I have been forced to attend counseling due to me burning down my own house. I will try to write up my other encounters soon, but it takes a lot out of me. Although each time it is read I do feel slightly better, even if it is not believed, at least I don't just have to keep it to myself. The Paleman. This is the story of an encounter that lasted off and on for almost a decade. Me and the Paleman. This started around when I was 13 years old. It's worth mentioning that I didn't have a very good home life, but I also wasn't very aware of this fact. I suspected that maybe families were sometimes just like that. Houses were always this messy and decrepit. Parents were always either insanely controlling and accusatory, or they weren't around at all. At this point in my life I would have to take a bus to school. I would wake up very early to catch it, and it was almost always still dark outside when I walked to the bus stop. In the corner of my eye, in there he would be, in my yard. The tall, gangly figure. He was maybe 7 feet tall. Papery white skin. Long arms. Spindly and long fingers. It had a humanoid-shaped body that was very, very thin and bony, and he had no face to speak of. He gave me a very deep sense of dread whenever I caught a glimpse of him. But oddly enough, he would just stand at the end of the yard. When I would try to look at him, he'd vanish. I thought maybe it was just my imagination. As time went on, he would appear in different places. When we moved, he would be at our new houses. I figured I brought him there. Sometimes at night, when everyone was asleep and the house was dark, in the pitch black living room I could swear I saw him, standing in the middle of the room or sitting on the couch. I avoided passing the living room at night altogether because of him. I was terrified of his presence. When I realized he probably wasn't going anywhere, I decided I should name him. I had an issue with personalizing things growing up. I would give objects names and personalities. It prevented me from wanting to throw things away, and I still sometimes struggle with this. But in this instance, naming him was what I was using to be less scared of him. I named him the Paleman. As my mental health declined, and the emotional weakness I was facing became more apparent and rampant, he became more bold, it seemed. Sometimes when I would be in the shower, I would swear I could see him on the other side of the curtain. I would see it slowly move, as if he were poking it. I would press my back against the wall of the shower and watch him slowly scratch at the curtain. He never tried to open it. He never made noises. I could just see his familiar tall shadow from behind the curtain. He scared me, but I felt confident telling myself he wasn't dangerous. One of the houses he followed us to had a long, poorly lit hallway, so any time of day, if my door was open, I would see him walk past, quietly and quickly in the dark. It almost became comforting to have him there. My mother was rarely home, and my brothers didn't seem to notice him. It's like he was there to check up on me. I started to whisper into the dark living room at night, "Good night, Paleman." And I would see him slowly wave from the couch. Fast forward to now. I live with my girlfriend. I started seeing a therapist. Though I haven't mentioned Paleman, when I started taking medication and addressing issues and old trauma, he started to show up less and less. The last I saw of him, he was in the living room. Standing. He was too tall for the room, so his head was a little bent forward. I waved at him. He waved back at me. I said to him, "Good night, Paleman." "Thank you." He bowed his head a bit. I walked to my bed. He stayed there. In the morning, as always, he was not there, but then the following nights he also hadn't shown. I was a bit sad to have him leave, but I'm sure it's for the better. I like to think he moved on to better things. I know I sure did. Thank you for listening. I saw a gnome, but I don't think I was supposed to see him. I have told this story to no one, except for my family, who get angry every time I bring it up. If you had a similar experience, please feel free to share it. When I was still in elementary school, I and my family used to spend all summer at my great-uncle's house. I and my family slept in the same room, except for my sister, who'd sleep on a bed in the living room, and my great-uncle, who'd sleep in his room. That one was a pretty normal day. We went to the beach, we ate some pizza, and then, at around 10 p.m., we all went to sleep. At around 4 a.m. I suddenly woke up because someone was throwing things around in the kitchen, plastic cups, containers, food, etc. The door was open, so I was able to see the light coming from the kitchen, so when I had enough of all that noise, I got up from the bed. At first something seemed off. I thought I was having some sort of strange dream, and as any rational kid would do, I tried to see if I could bend fire like in TLA, who wouldn't want to firebend, right? I couldn't. I wasn't dreaming. My father wasn't in his bed, but I didn't care much since maybe he was just in the bathroom. My great-uncle was fairly old and had trouble sleeping at night, so I thought he just went into the kitchen to get some water. "Uncle? Uncle? Are you all right?" All this noise woke me up. I said while making my way to the kitchen. To my surprise, the room was empty. But the light was on, and the fridge was open, with a can of Coke lying in front of it. What? I thought. I looked up to the shelf that was to my right, and I saw what was making that noise. Some sort of short creature, around 30 centimeters tall, a gnome you'd say, was looking at me, terrified. He was terrified because I saw him. I thought to myself, he's going to hurt me, it's better if I fake fainting. And so I did. After a couple of seconds I open my eyes, and I see that I'm not on the kitchen floor anymore. I was in a strange colorful tunnel. I got scared again and closed my eyes one more time. After a minute that felt like eternity, I reopened them, and I was lying in my bed. There were still sounds coming from the kitchen, but I was scared and just waited for them to stop. And before sunrise, they did. That wasn't the only encounter I had with that dude. But I never saw it again. I'd only hear him, because I was, and am, too scared to see him. I don't know what he was doing exactly, but I'm sure I wasn't supposed to see him. Feel free to ask me anything you want about this, even though I know it sounds crazy. There are many reports of humanoid encounters related to UFOs. There are hundreds of reports in which one can observe a direct relationship between UFOs and strange creatures. However, in this report we shall limit the scope to only the most relevant cases and those that present the most varied morphology. Likewise, we shall concentrate on those events that transpired after the so-called modern era of UFOs, which kicked off, as we all know, with Kenneth Arnold's sighting in 1947. 1. Bauru, State of São Paulo, July 23, 1947. Only 29 days after the Arnold sighting, Brazilian topographer José C. Higgins witnessed an enormous disk some 45 meters in width, whitish-gray in color, and supported by 4 metallic struts. 3 beings, measuring some 2.15 meters in height, 7 feet, stepped out of the craft wearing transparent outfits that covered them like plastic bags. They had round eyes, bald heads, and bulky round heads without eyebrows or facial hair. Their legs were proportionally longer than a human's. The witness could not determine if they were male or female but found that they had a certain beauty about them. 2. Near Santa Maria, State of Rio Grande do Sul, March 16, 1954. Reuben Hellwing encountered, on 2 successive days, a number of different entities. On the first day, he saw 2 slender men, 1.60 meters in height, with dark complexions and helmetless. On the following day he encountered a tall blonde man accompanied by 2 dark-skinned women with long, silky black hair and dark, slanted eyes. The 3 were dressed in identical one-piece brown outfits. In both cases, Hellwing was able to see a flying object resembling an inverted casserole. 3. Pontal, November 4, 1954. José Alves was out fishing when he met 3 diminutive creatures wearing white outfits and tight-fitting helmets. The entities had emerged from a discoidal vehicle some 3 to 4.5 meters in diameter. 4. Porto Alegre, State of Rio Grande do Sul, November 10, 1954. An agronomer from Porto Alegre allegedly saw 2 strange-looking men emerge from a discoidal structure some 5 meters in diameter. The figures were human-like, with long hair, and wearing coveralls. 5. Linha Bela Vista, State of Rio Grande do Sul, December 9, 1954. Olmira da Costa e Rosa, a farmer, met 3 average-height humanoids described as broad-shouldered, with pallid complexions, slanted eyes, and wind-tousled blonde hair, who were gathered outside 2 discoidal objects enveloped in a kind of fog. The farmer believed at first that they were aviators from another country. 6. São Sebastião, on Brazil's southern shore. At 7:10 p.m. on June 15, 1957, Professor João Freitas de Guimarães, attorney and professor of Roman law at the Catholic Law School, observed 2 tall men, 1.80 meters, with shoulder-length blonde hair, fair complexions, youthful demeanors, and a look in their eyes that expressed wisdom and understanding. They wore one-piece greenish outfits that were snug around the neck, wrists, and ankles. Professor Guimarães was able to see a luminous, hat-shaped object that descended not too far from his position. 7. Quibracoco, October 10, 1957. Spanish Navy officer Miguel E. and a companion were able to see a giant UFO whose portholes offered a glimpse of 7 small humanoid beings, no larger than a child, with long hair and clad in luminous outfits. 8. Minduri, August 23, 1958. On August 23, 1958, 2 giants whose height was estimated at 6 meters, 19 feet, clad in brilliant red outfits, were seen close to Minduri by 3 witnesses who also claimed having seen a hat-shaped luminous object suspended in the sky. 9. Belo Horizonte, State of Minas Gerais, August 28, 1963. At 7:15 p.m., 3 boys were standing in the backyard of their home in Belo Horizonte's Sagrada Família neighborhood when they noticed a large, transparent, luminous sphere descending toward them. One of the occupants of the sphere was a tall, slender man, some 2 meters in height, dressed in a scuba diver's outfit and with an entirely bald head contained within a massive helmet. The man was earless and noseless, red-skinned, and had a single large dark eye, without eyebrows or eyelashes, in the middle of his face. Fulvio Brant Alexio, a Brazilian researcher, first brought this case to light in the summer of 1965. 10. Cruzeiros, State of São Paulo, August 14, 1965. A railroad worker in Rio de Janeiro, João do Rio, had a close encounter with a creature measuring approximately 70 centimeters in height, with large luminous eyes recessed in a large bald head. The singular creature had emerged from a flying saucer. 11. São João, State of Pernambuco, September 10, 1965. Antonio Pau Ferreira, a 45-year-old farmer, was startled to behold two disc-shaped objects no larger than 1.50 meters wide and 60 centimeters thick, which disgorged two small beings of a generally human-like appearance, beardless, with reddish-brown skin and waxen complexions. They wore form-fitting outfits. 12. Alto dos Cruzeiros, Conhotenho Municipality, Pernambuco. On October 26, 1965, José Camilo Filho, a 56-year-old mechanic, witnessed a UFO flying over his neighborhood. Minutes later, driving along a highway, he noticed two small beings, less than a meter tall, with brown skins, wrinkled and furrowed faces like those of old men, white hair on enormous heads, and slanted eyes. One of these dwarves wore a pointed cap made of dark material, and a patchy beard grew on its face. Both creatures wore silvery outfits and luminous belts. 13. Agua Branca, Quipapa, State of Pernambuco, February 25, 1966. Maria Marluz and Maria Mariluce da Silva had an encounter with a disc-shaped object some 3 to 4 meters wide. Standing beside the object was a humanoid being some 2 meters tall surrounded by 6 small, large-headed creatures in coveralls. The creatures appeared to be talking among themselves. 14. Alexandria, Brasilia, December 27, 1967. Wilson Placido Gusmão, a resident of Brasilia, ran into 5 humanoid entities shortly after having witnessed a UFO. The creatures belonged to the oft-described category of long-haired blondes, with porcelain-like complexions and shimmering, form-fitting outfits. One of the humanoids, presumably the leader, had a light in front of him. 15. São Paulo, August 25, 1968. Maria José Sintra, a worker at Serafim Ferreira Hospital, was startled to encounter a strange woman with fair skin, wearing a light blue cloak over a silvery coverall with tight cuffs. The entity floated into a pear-shaped object, which floated less than a meter off the ground. 16. Prefeitura de Lins, State of São Paulo, October 2, 1968. Toribio Pereira witnessed 5 identical beings, which appeared to be repairing a luminous object that rested on the ground. The witness described the creatures as being some 1.50 meters tall, wearing radiant blue tunics that covered their heads, arms, and torsos. 2 other individuals wore brilliant red tunics. 17. Fazenda Bela Aliança, Pirassununga, February 6, 1969. José Antonio Fioco saw a strange craft lying in one of his ranch's pastures. 3 tall humanoids wearing brilliant silver outfits emerged from the vehicle. Their outfits had 3 large buttons on the torso. 18. Bairro Pinheiro, Pirassununga, February 6, 1969. Several residents of this community reported seeing the descent of a large luminous object around 7:30 a.m. 2 small men emerged from the object. Witnesses described them as having slender lips, flattened noses, dark eyes with neither pupils nor whites, and wearing illuminized outfits that covered their bodies. 19. Colegio Batista, March 22, 1969. 2 girls observed a small man wearing a helmet that projected a greenish radiance through bulbs shaped like cat's eyes. 2 hours earlier, the girls had seen a strange luminous object that appeared to be following them. 20. Itaperuna, December 20, 1971. Manuel da Silva Souza witnessed a strange discoidal object on the ground. Standing beside it were 4 diminutive humanoids with bare round heads, thin noses, and slanted eyes, wearing emerald-colored clothing. The beings appeared to be mouthless. 21. Baldem, Minas Gerais, July 12, 1972. João Alves Sobrinho saw 2 small beings along the roadside, wearing light-colored, long-sleeved clothing, standing beside a dark object with 7 luminous sources outside it. The witness did not hesitate to notify the corresponding authorities. 22. Londrina, January 5, 1973. João Marques reported seeing an airplane-sized object that disgorged a humanoid occupant, dressed all in white, wearing a helmet. The creature made a friendly gesture at the witness. 23. 1973, precise date unknown. Bernadette Gomez, adopted daughter of General Moacir Ulloa, was taken to some location in the Amazon, where she witnessed an extraordinary blue light, which produced a normal-sized entity wearing a tight-fitting outfit. The creature cured the young woman of a disease known as mal de Chagas, a fact corroborated by Santa Lucia Hospital in Rio de Janeiro. 24. Paciencia, Rio de Janeiro, September 15, 1977. Antonio La Rubia allegedly encountered an unknown object resting in the middle of a football field. As he turned away from the object, he encountered 3 robot-like figures, each measuring approximately 1.20 meters. The robots had antennae that extended over their heads like footballs, in whose center was a band of tiny transparent mirrors in shades of blue. They had thick bodies and appendixes resembling arms, which thinned out toward their ends. La Rubia compared them to an elephant's trunk. The witness claims to have been abducted by these creatures. There's a creature trying to end me, and it's getting closer. Okay, so this has been going on for almost 2 years, and it's still happening. The occasions aren't regular, but they are consistent enough for me to write this, so as much as I tell everyone, myself included, that I'm not scared, I must be to some extent. I think the first time was in November-ish, of 2017, and it was my first experience of sleep paralysis too. Basically I woke up one night, and my eyes were open, and I was facing left towards the small curtain on the opposite side of my room separating mine and my little sister's room. For a bit of context, we share a large room with the door directly opposite my bed about 10 feet away with what is essentially a 2 centimeters thick fake wall running parallel with my bed with about 7 to 8 feet of space between, and as a door we have a curtain on the far side and easy view of my bed. As I was saying, I awoke one night, lying on my side, facing the fake wall, and I noticed I couldn't move. I was moving my eyes around what part of the room I could see, and then I saw it. In front of the curtain I saw a tall, dark outline of a black figure facing me. I couldn't make out any details as it was pitch black in my room, but I know it was facing me, staring at me. And I think it saw me looking at it because it slowly walked backwards back into my sister's room, still staring at me as if it was waiting for me to go back to sleep. Now don't ask me why, but for some ungodly reason I didn't panic. I don't think it registered with my brain because I genuinely just closed my eyes and went back to ducking sleep. Don't ask me why. I woke up the next morning and had completely forgotten until I looked in my mirror and saw where it had been and almost had a heart attack. I spent the whole day telling everyone I saw that story, and I thought that would be the end of it. 9 months later, in August of 2018, I was drifting off to sleep when I opened my eyes, and I saw a tall, dark figure standing at the end of my ducking bed. Now this time I instantly start freaking the absolute duck out. I knew it was the same thing as before, and I couldn't take my eyes off it because I knew if I did, it would jump off the ducking bed and get me. So I'm staring at this thing dead in what I assume are its eyes. It's real dark, so I can't be sure, and I'm trying to reach for my phone to turn on the flashlight. I finally grab it, and I look down for 0.02 seconds to turn the torch on, and it's just disappeared. I had a struggle sleeping that night. A few weeks later I was staying at my mate's house, and I was sleeping on her floor whilst she was in her bed, and in my dream I was being chased by something. I can't remember the specifics, but in my dream I was screaming. But you know how you can't scream properly in dreams and it's just quiet choking? It was just that until I woke up only to be told by my friend that I was screaming in my sleep and it actually woken both her and myself up. This I found ducking hilarious tbh, and I went back to sleep. And in December of 2018, a man gave me a small New Testament, which I took and placed under my mattress. I'm not religious or anything at all, but I thought anything to stop this thing, which had been seemingly getting closer to me after every encounter. The most recent time we met was a few months ago, about March/April, and it was in my dream. I was walking through town and kept turning around and seeing this same creature standing really far away from me but slowly getting closer the more I turned to see it. The next thing I know I'm in a shop queue, and I turned around, and the best way I can describe it is like this. You know those plague doctors they had during the Black Death, the ones with long pointy masks? Picture that standing right there, in front of me, reaching out to grab me. I woke up real quick and told all my friends about this new update of this fascinating saga. I was cleaning my room a few days later, and I discovered the small Bible I had under my mattress had fallen down the back of my bed, and I'm convinced that's why I saw this creature again. I joke about it all the time, calling myself crazy, but I'm pretty sure deep down, the next time I see it, it's going to ducking end me or something. Thank you for listening to this. I'm not a writer, so I'm sorry if any of it is unclear, and I promise this is true. In 2001, I faced a terrifying creature in the French Alps with my father. It was winter, and we had gathered for the holidays with family in a shepherd's cabin in the middle of nowhere that my father had restored. Everything was going well. We had left a window open because the wood fire was making it warm. Suddenly, a huge Tibetan Mastiff came crashing through the window, terrified, to hide behind the sofa. We laughed it off, but my father said nothing. He went into another room and came back with 2 MAS 36 rifles and some ammo. You should know that my father is a former Legionnaire. He handed me one and told me to load it, attach the bayonet, take a defensive position, and hurry up. While we were waiting, pointing our rifles at the window, he explained that a Tibetan Mastiff like this one spends its whole life outside in the cold, fending for itself for food. Shepherds use them to fight against wolves and bears that threaten their flocks. Normally, these animals are afraid of nothing. There is no animal in France that could scare them. After a while, my father told me we had to go outside and check. So we went out and walked around the cabin before following the tracks the dog had left in the snow, hoping to find out what could have put it in such a state. Following them across the plain and into the forest led us to the road, which we decided to walk up, and that's when we saw it next to a street lamp. A kind of huge, stinking deer, taller than the street lamp, with red eyes. It was standing on its two legs and had a kind of humanoid arm. My father shot, so I started shooting too, but it had no effect at all. It just walked slowly back into the forest, staring at us as if to say, I could have killed you just as easily. After that, we went back to the cabin, as white as ghosts, and told no one. We said we had shot at a bear. 3 amphibious humanoids spotted in England. Brighton, England, a 26-year-old man says he came upon 3 humanoid creatures on the beach in East Sussex. The Judokan teacher on Wednesday told News that he was walking his way home along the seafront pavement in Brighton at 10:30 p.m. when the event purportedly took place. I stopped to light a cigarette and heard noises towards the sea, other than the waves, the man, who provided a full name but requested anonymity, said about last Saturday's encounter. The sounds were very strange, a kind of wheezing oge noise. The eyewitness reports that, concerned about someone choking, he went and looked over the railing. I then shouted hello. And that's when I saw 3 small figures stand up from what I guess was a prone position. All 3 stared for a few seconds, then leapt back down and turned and crawled into the sea. He recalls about the incident. The amphibious creatures, he said, were about 3 feet tall and exhibited a wide head with large eyes. I could clearly see in the dark. They seemed to move in a way that suggested a strange and flexible bone structure. They leapt up onto 2 legs quickly and, just as swiftly, into a prone, almost frog-like position. In November 2015, a family in Somerset County reported their Frome home had been broken into by a group of small creatures that looked like the typical greys. His 2 young sons reportedly asked their father whether the clowns would be coming back. In the summer of 1955, an American family reported to have suffered a similar experience in a rural farmhouse in Kentucky. The Brighton claimed the Lovecraft-esque scene is not unique. In July 2014, multiple witnesses reported having seen a 5-foot-tall humanoid floating in the air as it walked along the shores of Necochea, Argentina. Brighton is a seaside town located about an hour south of London and has a population of 155,000. I've seen one. About 2 years ago, my girlfriend and I, at the end of the day, would park about 1.5 blocks from her apartment and walk to get inside so my truck wouldn't be seen there and nobody would bother us. So like any other night, we park, gather our things, and beat feet for the house. I believe it was September, doesn't matter. Long story short, the road we're on forms a T intersection. And straight ahead past the T was a house on roughly an acre lot. Some old lady lived there, alone, I believe, and her kids visited her daily to check up on their mom. Well, it's probably 11:30 at night. Not super late. Directly behind this house, close enough to reach out and touch its back left corner, and under a humming street light, is a creature that looks like a 7-foot-tall solid silver humanoid. Bear with me, it's the only way I know to describe it. It is what looks like a 7G or T, solid silver, humanoid creature. It was oddly tall and lanky. No facial features that I've ever been able to recall, no hair, just slick. And it's cut. Its chest appeared muscular, similar to washboard abs. However, its hands were easily 4 times larger than the rest of its awkwardly tall, slender build. Each finger came to a point, and I believe he had 1 finger too many on both hands. You know that plastic fan-style rake you rake leaves in the yard with? His hands reminded me of one of those. And he was wearing just basketball shorts. I guess. 1 solid color in his entirety. He looked like the creature in American Horror Story, Hotel or whatever, the silver guy with the drill bit strap on? He would look like that person if he were 1.5 taller and lankier. Instead of a strap on, it resembled Witchblade from the Wolverine comics, particularly in its hands. It was like I caught it off guard. Staring into space with its mouth open or something, because it was just standing there for a second. And then I kind of saw it snap too. It raised its arms, crossing them at chest height, and then ducked behind the house. And that was it. I guess it was gone. I certainly didn't go look. Yeah, I got to the end of the street and saw it. It snapped too and ducked from sight. I dunno what the F, but any info would be helpful. Hope this made sense. Saw a gray creature at my old university. I went to a university in Pennsylvania outside of Philadelphia. I will leave it up to you to decide which one you think it is. It was a Catholic university, so I never expected to see anything odd there, ever, of the paranormal sort. This university had woods near it and a good amount to boot, and 2 cemeteries near it, one being close to campus and one across the parking lot from the cafeteria. The one close to campus is important to the story as a nearby landmark. The second would be the road nearby that leads to a gate. This road is important to the second sighting. The first time I saw this was on Legion Road. There is a small fenced-in area with a small building. I saw something gray at first that looked like a rock or stump. Even though I was in the car, I could see it looked like something sitting on the ground with its back to me. If you had Gollum from LOTR sit on the ground with his legs pulled against his chest, this is what it would look like to me. The second event happened at night while on a ghost hunt the school had. We went outside, and I remember it being windy and cold. We left from the back entrance to the main building and walked to a spot near a landscaped area with a trellis. We talked about where to go and started walking. The one cemetery mentioned before as a landmark is to the left of this spot across a road. I remember us going right from where we stood toward the road that led to the gate. It was in front of us. I saw this gray humanoid-looking creature run parallel to us and go down near the road before I lost sight of it. It was night, so I know it was gray, but what shade, honestly, I am not sure. I would say slate gray. Size would be about 4 feet tall, perhaps it was hunched a little while walking, so this is an estimate. I looked far and wide for anything similar to this after the event happened and found nothing. The only thing like it was the rake story, and that's fictional. Has anyone else seen anything like this? Aliens of the Amazon. The year was 1977, and I was 14 years old. I used to live with my mom, dad, and sister in a house. We lived in a city called Colares in Brazil. My dad used to work as a construction worker in the city, and he also had a corn farm away from there. The city was small and had a little more than 1,000 people. We used to go to the school in the morning, and the school was inside the church. I would go out and play with my friends in the afternoon, and we would still be playing until night. There were other small villages around, and the kids from these villages would join us too. It all started in mid-August. 5 of my friends and I were walking in a region we called the beach. The beach was a place, somewhat far away from the city, surrounded by woods. We used to go there occasionally. We would start a fire and sit around it to tell each other stories. We had some dogs with us that day. All of a sudden we started to smell something strange. It was like this weird chemical smell. The dogs then started to bark in the direction of the woods. We all looked at the tree line, trying to see something. My friend and I stood up and gathered 2 large sticks to leave around the area for emergencies. The dogs got more and more agitated. We then saw some movement in the woods. The dogs ran in the direction of the movement, and before we could do anything, they disappeared in the darkness. We tried following them, but they were too fast, and their barks would get more and more distant. The noises then stopped. We kept running. We eventually found the dogs, all dead. They all had that chemical smell, and one of them had this weird transparent goo in his mouth. They also didn't have any injuries. I remember that I cried a lot that night. One of the dogs was mine, and I really liked it. Some weeks later, everything was normal. I was at my house, sleeping. I woke up in the middle of the night. I heard 2 or 3 cars accelerating on the road in front of my house. I found it a bit weird but thought nothing more of it. I went to sleep again. In the morning, I got ready for school. As soon as I opened the door, 2 of my friends were waiting for me. They started telling me what happened during the night. Apparently one of the villages got attacked by some sort of light. I didn't believe them at first. However, when we went by the only clinic in town, there were more people than usual in front of it. One girl was sitting in front of the clinic, crying. We knew that girl, she would sometimes play with us, and she was from another village. We quickly went to her and asked what happened. She then told us a story that gave me goosebumps. Apparently everything was okay until 11 p.m. The people of her house were in the living room talking. Suddenly, they hear some commotion outside. As they went to see, there were some people pointing at the skies. So they looked up as well. She said they could see some weird lights in the sky. They were almost round and would illuminate some of the clouds near them. She got scared by it and decided to go back home. As she was getting back, a huge flash of light illuminated the village. She ran inside and hid, meanwhile listening to people screaming outside. The flashes would continue, and a buzz sound would fill the air. Then it finally stopped. She heard her dad coming inside with her mom, both in pain. After that, some of the people from the village went around to check on everyone. Her mom and dad were vomiting in the living room when the people came. They got everyone inside a car and took them to the hospital. That story scared me and my friends. We all got to school later, and all of our friends looked weirded out as well. After asking a quick question, they informed us that they were also aware of what had happened. We had classes with the priest as normal, and later, we went home. After lunch, my friends and I decided to explore the area a bit. You could see a change in the atmosphere of the town. People were scared about what happened. We then went to the beach again, me and my friends. And as we used to do, we stayed there until night. The moon was illuminating the sky and reflecting on the river. Then we heard a weird noise over in the distance. Suddenly, a big shadow covers the moon. When we looked up, we couldn't move from so much fear. There was this black thing directly on top of us. A huge dark ellipsoid, with lights under it. It was big and standing still on top of us. One of my friends screams, and we start running into the woods. We hid ourselves in a sort of cave, unaware if the thing was really after us. We stood there for a while. After we decided it was safe, we went running into town again. As soon as we approached the town, we could hear that something was wrong because screams echoed in the distance. As we got to it, some people were crying and screaming in the streets. I quickly ran to my house. As I got there, my dad was going out of my house holding my mom. I immediately helped him carry my mother, who was crying in pain. We went to the hospital. When we got there, a lot more people were there too. The one medic was running side to side trying to calm people down. In the light of the hospital, I could talk to my dad about what happened. He said that they heard a noise outside and stayed inside in fear. People could see the light in the sky again. When the flashes started, they were inside. Apparently, a flash came from a hole on the roof and got to my mom. Where the flash hit her, there were 2 needle-like holes. The area where the flash just hit was marked and had black marks in it. As more people came in, I would hear them talking about the injuries. Apparently the injuries were all almost exactly the same. Even the people who got totally exposed by the flashes, all they had were 2 needle-like holes and some black marks. When it was finally dawn, my father gathered some friends, and they went to the mayor's house. It was at this point, in the hospital, that I heard the name for the first time. They were calling these flashes the chupa chupa. Suck in English, because some people reported that the light was sucking blood from them. The days passed, and more places started reporting the incident. People would light big bonfires at the main square, in fear of the flashes. Then the military arrived, and they set up camp near the town. I had seen guns before, but nothing quite like that. They had this big anti-air gun. It was installed in the middle of the base. This didn't stop the things from happening. Every day, more and more people were attacked. The feeling of hopelessness finally made a good part of the town move away. My family and I moved to a village located about 40 kilometers from the city. We had a small farm there, where my dad used to grow corn. We thought we would be safe there, and I had to quit school because of the whole deal. My daily routine involved helping my dad during the day and hanging out with some kids from the neighborhood later. Things were quite calm for a week. That all changed one day when the lights suddenly came on. I was at home with my parents, and we had to hide from the flashes under a big table in the kitchen. Some of the other families weren't so lucky and got hit by them. My dad took it upon himself to take some people to Colaire's hospital. The next day, he didn't come home. I tended to the farm as usual, waiting for him to come back. Later, I got on my bicycle and went to hang around with the other kids. We went pretty far from town. When it was almost dark, we were already on our way back, and I saw my dad's car driving along the road. He didn't stop, as we were all going back together, me and the other kids. The thing is, all of the kids would go home, and I would have to ride another 12 minutes until I got home. It was dark already, and I was alone about halfway home. Then, I saw the lights in the sky, and the flashes started. This time, as I was riding my bicycle, I didn't have a single space to hide from the flashes. As soon as the first flash hit me, I fell to the ground, paralyzed. I couldn't move or scream, and I felt the pain of the flashes scorching my skin. When the lights stopped, I got up. 2 holes were open near my neck, and I had black marks all over me. I went home, stumbling here and there from the pain. That was about the last straw for my father. He got me in the car and went to the hospital with me. There, at least 3 more people were waiting, all victims of the flashes. The entire family was required to remain in the church as they awaited my medical attention. I spent the next day in the hospital, as I had more wounds from the bicycle fall. That night, we heard strange noises while in the hospital. It all started with a weird buzz. I recognized it from that day at the beach and started crying. Suddenly, another noise, a helicopter. It went by the city, really fast. Sometime later, a loud noise. I had never heard an anti-air gun before, but from the noise, I knew it was that thing firing at something. Then, everything got quiet. We went back to the farm the next day. We could see the remaining people of the town were all on edge about what happened the other day. At this point, it was at the end of February. About a week later, the military returned to the capital. For some time in the following months, we would still see the lights, but the flashes that used to hurt us were gone. The town went back to normal then. So, I grew up in this town, and in 1989 my dad passed away. I then went to live on the corn farm, in the small house we had there. The house wasn't big, but it had everything I needed. I used to tend to the crops during the day and made a chicken coop. One night, I was almost asleep, but suddenly the dogs started barking outside. I had these big dogs for protection. I stood up from my bed, got my gun, and went to check outside. I could hear something moving in the cornfield. As I got outside, I started to smell something weird. A chemical smell. I stood outside in the front door, looking at the movement in the cornfield. Something then blocks the light of the moon. I look up, and I see the same black shape I had seen years ago. When I looked back down again, I could see a thing. A small, thin humanoid figure was about 1.5 meters tall. It had brownish, pale skin, a big head, and big, bulgy black eyes. When I looked at it, I felt a strong headache. I twisted myself and managed to get inside my house and close the door. I was so scared I even ended up pissing myself. I then sat at the corner of the living room, gun pointed at the door. The dogs kept barking outside. I saw shadows passing in front of the window, but I refused to look at them. I stood there until I could see the light of the moon again, and the smell disappeared. I got up, ran to my car, and drove all the way to my sister's house, at the capital. I went back there to get my stuff, but I would never live near that region again. A friend of mine still lives there. He says that occasionally, he can still see the lights in the sky. I saw a creature in the desert. This story takes place in the deserts of Arizona. My dad and I are on a camping trip with the rest of our family, but due to the size of the family, we had to take 2 cars, one for boys and one for girls. I had 3 sisters, but I was the only boy. 3 hours later and nightfall approaches, making it harder to drive with only one headlight working, so my dad decides we should stop and camp there for the night. I said I was okay with camping as long as we slept in the car, which isn't really camping. However, if I had to choose between a car seat and sleeping on the ground, then we could discuss it further. Anyways, he agreed, so we drove off the road onto the sand with cactus as far as the eye can see, and we both began our descent into slumber. Only I couldn't, as I was a bit of an insomniac, which I was fine with. It just meant I could look up at the night sky, but then I heard the blood-curdling screech of some kind of humanoid being howling at the vast emptiness of the desert. At first I thought it was a coyote, but coyotes don't sound like that. Frozen solid, I look out the window to see a tall, lanky creature standing on all 4 of its extremely long, unnatural appendages. At first glance, it would have just blended in with the cacti surrounding the area with its seemingly prickly skin, but I didn't just peek and look away. I was flat out staring at it until my eyes locked with its 2 small white dots, which was all I could see. I'm shitting bricks at this point, but bricks turn to boulders as it fully charges at the small car, which could easily be flipped with little effort. I guess that all the commotion woke up my dad because before I knew it, we were driving off the sand back onto the road, flooring it the whole way, only to get the back window smashed in with the creature slamming its 2-finger hand in the glass screen, sending shards everywhere, even into its own hand. It didn't follow us for much longer. As it had glass shrapnel in its hand, it started to slow down and limp away, leaving blood marks on the back door. We kept driving without looking back, fearing to see it again. Eventually we had to stop as we caught up with the rest of the family. We all shared the same expressions on our faces, the look of terror glued on. That day is one I'll never forget. Humanoid Pig Man. My bizarre encounter with a humanoid happened a while ago when I was about 6 or 7 years old and would start a string of nightmares. I would have every night a pig man. From what I remember, I was sleeping peacefully in bed until I awoke to a large pig creature, which looked to be around 7 or 8 feet tall. I remember the pig man looking at me at about eye level. I was on the top of a bunk bed. Only after a few seconds did the creature break this stare and proceed to dash out of my room. As soon as I lost sight of the creature, I woke my parents up, and they reassured me it was a nightmare, but I can remember having a dream in which I was near a row of houses with my family, only what I can assume was seconds before I saw it. As well as remembering the actual incident, I can remember some details of the pig man. While it looked rather pig-like, it didn't have the same animalistic features you would expect on a pig. The pig man had ears, a snout, etc. It didn't have an innocent pig-like look, and its stare looked more humanoid. As well as facial features, I can remember that it stood on 2 legs and didn't really have any clothing on. One weird aspect of this experience was the nightmares I had afterwards, one of which included the pig man hurting my father. Additionally, I have never experienced waking dreams or sleep paralysis before, and I am unsure if this incident was an isolated case of either. Could someone please help me understand or explain what happened that night or what I saw? Humanoid alien encounter. Hi all. I've been new here for the past few days, and I've been lurking around, well, searching actually. I wanted to find a place where I could share my encounters. It was on a Monday evening. I thought I would get into a meditative state and see if I could get anything from remote viewing, so I did all that, and then I saw myself on a beach similar to the Mornington Peninsula. There was a lookout to my far left and 3 standalone massive rocks in the ocean. The sky was part sunrise or sunset, and the other part was the night sky. I saw a being walk towards me and say, "This is what your mind looks like from the inside. You have come far out of the dark forest." But mind you, I was scared of the ocean because it reminds me of my depression. Anyways, he asked me where I wanted to go. And so I said, Mars? And so he put out his hand and said, "Let's go." I visualized the black window, and we went through it. I could see myself floating up into space, and I could see Earth, it's sort of round. Then, as we got closer to the moon, I saw a cylinder-shaped object just behind the side we cannot see. My guide told me not to get too close, they're not good. Anyways, we come to Mars now. Yes, it's red, but there is also some blue on it too as well. We came down and landed on the surface. It was rocky and very hard but cool to stand on. I looked around, and it was desert-like. My vision was blurry, not high resolution. I remember picking up some dirt on the ground. It was sand with flecks of metallic-like dust, and in another part, it was wet, fine sand, just damp, pretty much. Then I see a bright light up ahead, and I walk towards it. And then I see this being crouching on the ground. I moved closer to see what it was doing. Then I saw a vial in its hand, and then he turned and put it in this white egg-shaped thing. I went a little closer, and I asked, "What are you doing?" I saw the being freeze and turn and stand up in front of me. He said to me, "You are not supposed to be here. You need to go. Don't let the others see you." I'm like, "Okay, well, come visit me, this is where I live." I don't know why I said it, but I did. I remember coming back and opening my eyes, thinking, why would you say that? I needed a drink, I thought. I then got up and looked at the time. It was 9:30 p.m. I then made my way to the toilet and to the kitchen to have a drink, and I walked into the lounge room to get something, and then a bright light suddenly filled my room. That's when I saw that same person standing in my lounge room. He said straight away, "Don't be afraid," and I told him to go sit down. I was still afraid and uncomfortable, and I thought, aren't I supposed to feel like unconditional love or something? The being told me they do this in order to calm the humans down for their safety or something. So he did, and then he took off the helmet he was wearing, and I couldn't stop staring. He was human-like but different. He was tall, way taller than me. I'm 5 feet 2. He had big blue eyes, a small nose, and a small mouth. His hair was shoulder length and straight, appearing silver or white, though it seemed almost transparent. His skin resembled a very pale violet, almost translucent in appearance. I thought to myself I should have gotten him a drink or something. He just laughed and said it was okay. I asked him if he felt more comfortable speaking like me or if he preferred to speak telepathically. He chose the latter. I didn't know what to ask, actually, because I had many questions running through my head, but the only one that popped out was, "Can I see your hands?" Stupid, right? But I did ask for it. I told him I wanted to read his palms so I could get to know him that way. He was surprised but enthusiastic about it, so he put his hands out in front of me. Long story short, I didn't go through with it and told him, "No, I'm dirty." He looked at me and asked why. So, I pretty much sent him images and feelings of my whole life, everything about me really. He then grabbed my hands and said, "I can take you away. I can take you with me." I asked, "Can I come back and visit my family?" He said, "No, because where we're going, 10 or 50 years could pass." I asked him, "What about my family? Will my family know that I am gone?" He said, "We can erase their minds and everyone you've ever met. So they wouldn't have to suffer." I also asked him if he could change the past. He said no, they can't change what's already happened, we aren't allowed to either. So I cried and begged if they could put someone in my sister's life to be there in my stead, and he just looked at me and said he cannot do that. So I cried and said I'll stay because I couldn't leave them. Then I sort of dozed off, I guess, and remember being taken back to my room and then someone saying something to me about. I can't remember that well. I remember waking up in my bed thinking, what the F just happened? And I looked at the clock, it said 11:35 p.m. I then heard helicopters flying low, but I assumed they could have been part of a training exercise since I live an hour away from an army base that trains recruiters. I know it sounds insane, you don't have to believe me. But it did happen to me. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Incredible humanoid stories that soldiers reported over the years from Vietnam. Other encounters with strange beasts clearly diverge off into more bizarre territory, presenting creatures that seem more than just undiscovered species of some sort but rather something more mysterious. One such account allegedly occurred on December 17, 1974, when a platoon of soldiers was out on a search and destroy mission along a river just north of the DMZ in the early morning hours. The platoon had penetrated a heavily wooded riverbank to reach a clearing, and it was then that they noticed that the area was strangely silent and devoid of the typical jungle sounds and its incessant drone of insects, animals, and birds. Sensing that this was bad news, a scout was sent ahead to see if enemies were in the vicinity, but nothing was found, not even any tracks. In the meantime, as the eerie, almost oppressive silence continued, some piles of what appeared to be dung from some large, unidentified animal were found scattered about the clearing, and as the soldiers examined them, there were heard crashing sounds from the thick brush. The platoon allegedly looked up to see several large humanoid creatures come lumbering out of the trees and brush, which were unlike anything any of them had ever seen. The creatures were estimated as being around 8 feet in height, with a bright yellow coloration and 3-fingered hands that ended in wicked-looking talons. The faces of these strange beasts were flat and sported large eyes, with only a couple of slits for a nose. These giant, yellow-skinned beings reportedly passed right by the platoon without paying any attention to them. However, when the frightened soldiers began to flee, they heard loud sounds of crushing brush behind them and realized that the creatures were following. As the increasingly unsettled men picked up their pace and broke into a run, the crashing became more frantic and ominous, as if the giants were closing in for the kill. Several of the men reportedly fired their weapons at their pursuers to no apparent effect, with the creatures barely flinching even when hit with armor-piercing rounds. The men were now running as fast as they could towards their boat moored at the riverside, sporadically firing ineffectually behind them as the beasts closed in. They finally reached their boat and beat a hasty retreat, and as they left, they purportedly saw the haunting sight of dozens of the huge humanoids gathered on the shore watching them leave. What in the world did these men see? We may never know. An equally bizarre account was given by an anonymous U.S. Army corporal in the Vietnam War, who claims that he had a very strange encounter in 1970 in a region of South Vietnam about 30 miles south of the DMZ. According to the man, he had been second in command of a platoon of soldiers, and they had just set up a bivouac in a heavily forested area marked with steep hills. After setting up camp, that evening the platoon engaged in a patrol of a small valley near the camp and detected movement ahead. Thinking it might be an enemy patrol, the soldiers hid and waited for around 15 minutes, during which time they continued to witness sporadic, furtive activity through the trees, although visibility was poor and there was not enough light to make out who or what was causing it. The movement eventually ceased, and the squad warily continued on their mission, with only the light of the full moon to guide them. Jungle patrol in the Vietnam War. At some point the platoon supposedly came across a wall of what appeared to be boulders that had been stacked one on top of another smack in the middle of a pass between two steep hills. On the side of this sheer wall was a dark opening that looked as if it could be the entrance of a cave, about 5 feet high and 3 feet wide, and when the men drew closer, they could see that the surface of the opening was smooth, as if it had been carefully carved away by hand or bored by machinery of some sort. Although the Viet Cong enemy was well known to utilize tunnels and caves, none of the men had ever seen a cave opening quite like this one. Things got stranger still when they drew nearer and detected a rancid stench coming from the murky blackness within, which was described as being so gut-wrenchingly putrid that some of the soldiers felt strongly sick to their stomachs and backed away in revulsion. Lights shone into the maw of the cave did very little to illuminate what lay within that dank place or what was producing the odoriferous stench, and it was finally decided that they would fall back to around 150 feet away from the entrance and stake out the entrance for a time to see what would happen. As the platoon waited there observing the cave opening, it was noticed that the night was unusually quiet and eerily calm, with a noticeable absence of the usual jungle sounds that should have been all around them. The only thing they could hear was unidentified deep rumbling sounds seeming to come from somewhere off in the distance, and the whole atmosphere was described as being quite unsettling indeed. They would wait there the entire night without incident, and as dawn approached, at 0500 hours, and as the first light made a shy appearance, some movement was finally spied at the darkened cave entrance. The soldiers tensed up, and what at first was assumed to be a man emerged from the cave to crouch in the clearing in front of the cave's maw. However, the platoon soon noticed that when the figure stood up, it measured around 7 feet in height and moved in a peculiar manner. The platoon became firmly aware that the thing was not human just as another came stalking out from the cave, and it was at this time that they were both claimed to start making hellish hissing sounds. As they watched on, it could be discerned that the creatures looked like bipedal, humanoid lizards, with scaly, shiny skin described as being so dark as to be practically obsidian black in color. The arms and legs were human-like but scaly and tipped with claws. The faces had enormous, forward-set eyes that were said to look snake-like. No tails were visible, and both of the beings were clearly wearing clothing of some sort in the form of dark green robes. What happened next was sudden and abrupt chaos that the witness describes thus. No one gave the order, it seemed like the entire squad opened fire at once. Every piece of vegetation between us and them was quickly sheared away. I yelled out a ceasefire order, at the same time I was looking in the direction of the cave. There was nothing there. We immediately checked our flank in case these things circled around us, but there was nothing. As we approached the cave, ready to resume action if needed, it became apparent that the beings had escaped, most likely back into the cave. It was soon decided to set charges and close the cave entrance. When we returned to camp, we all seemed to be in a daze. There was little discussion of the incident, and we were never debriefed, so I know the sergeant never filed a report. However, the brass suppressed any report he might have filed. It is hard to know how to classify this particular report. Was this just a tall tale? Was it some sort of subterranean lost civilization? Was it aliens? Who knows? One report that does seem to suggest aliens is another case from 1967. On October 12 of that year, a 6-man long-range recon patrol was operating in a heavily jungled region near the North Vietnam border, and they set up camp with a night defense perimeter that evening, with the men taking turns sleeping as the others maintained a lookout for the enemy. At around 1:45 a.m., the leader of the patrol was on watch and claims that he saw movement nearby, after which he woke the other men, and they prepared their weapons for a potential firefight. As the patrol geared up and turned their eyes to the dark jungle, a very strange creature emerged from the murk. It was described as looking like a small, gray humanoid with enormous black eyes, a long face, and slender arms, which gave off a faint glow that pushed back the clinging darkness around it. One of the men allegedly did not hesitate to fire at the creature, hitting it squarely in the head to send a brilliant blue syrupy fluid spattering the foliage. At that moment, 3 lights appeared in the sky to form a perfect triangle before darting into the night sky. It would later become known that 2 other recon teams operating in the area had similar strange encounters that evening, and that headquarters was claiming that it was hard to keep radio contact due to some sort of communications disturbance. Aliens or a tall tale? Some strange accounts from the war are a bit harder to classify, and one of these is certainly the case of what has come to be mostly known as the Bird Woman of Da Nang, which was most famously recounted by John Keel in his Mothman Prophecies, in which he credits the source as being FSR Case Histories, number 10, June 1972. In the summer of 1969, a private first class in the Marine Corps by the name of Earl Morrison was sitting on top of a bunker near Da Nang with 2 others on guard duty when they claimed to have seen something unlike anything they had ever experienced before. At first it started as a weird glow in the sky, the source indiscernible, but as it drew closer they could make out that it was some sort of flying humanoid with bat-like wings. The creature slowly approached, revealing certain features. The creature seemed to be in the form of a naked woman, with long flowing hair and totally black skin that cast an eerie greenish glow around it. The entity was described as being completely silent and as flying very slowly and purposefully. Morrison would say of the odd sight, there was a glow on her and around her. Everything glowed. It appeared as though she emitted a glow and radiated light. We saw her arms extending toward the wings, and they resembled regular molded arms, each with a hand and fingers. However, skin from the wings covered them. And when she flapped her wings, there was no noise at first. It looked like her arms didn't have any bones in them, because they were limbered just like a bat. The strange entity inexorably came closer as the shocked men looked on, unsure of what to do, until it was hovering a mere 6 or 7 feet above their heads, so close that she blotted out the moon. None of them knew what to do, and all they could do was stare with mouths agape, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. The entire time they could hear no sound from the creature, and it was not until she was continuing on her way that they could make out the faint sound of her wings flapping. The entire encounter was reported as lasting between 3 and 4 minutes. Interestingly, Vietnamese folklore speaks of what are referred to as night flyers, which are winged humanoids usually described as being women and which are said to swoop down to attack the unwary. The Vietnam War was certainly a time of great turmoil and horror for the people who served there. All the wartime experiences truly represent the full range of human emotions. Yet buried within tales of death and scattered about the numerous accounts of fighting, heroism, and atrocity are some tales that seem to transcend the usual war stories to firmly entrench themselves into the realm of the truly bizarre. Besides the human monsters of war, there seem to be these cases, which point to very literal monsters. We know that armed conflict can be a turbulent time filled with strangeness, but cases like these demonstrate that it can be even stranger than we initially believe, revealing dark entities that go bump in the night and defy explanation, remaining conundrums on the bloody landscape of war. Thank you for your time to listen to these stories.